capital of South Korea, the year 2021. We have a beautiful day, very sunny, and we can see 5 students in an alley. But to be more specific, it's 4 people against 1. And we see a studious boy, holding his notebook, speaking to the bully. His classmate telling him to quickly say what he wants because he doesn't want to be late for his prep class. And with an air of superiority, he doesn't even look the bully in the face. Already quite annoyed with the guy, the nervous one says, "What's up, Jamin?" Jamin is the name of the guy holding the notebook, and we will call him Jamin. Jamin tells the bully that if he has nothing to say, he's leaving. And all the bully's friends start laughing at him, saying that the bully with the little tuft was completely ignored. After being mocked a lot by his peers, he gets very angry and yells at Jamin, calling him a piece of crap, telling him to stop right now. Calling Jamin a son of a good mother, he prepares a punch and runs to hit him from behind. Jamin, with the air of a protagonist, closes his notebook without looking back and delivers a big kick to Tupatinho's head, causing him to lose his balance and fall, without noting the license plate of the truck that ran him over. Tupatinho is on the ground, struggling with his body not to pass out. Will he pass out from that kick or not? And I would have passed out. Jamin, with the air of a protagonist, looks down at Tupatinho with superiority. But Tupatinho is good at fighting and didn't even faint. He gets up cursing at Jamin. Jamin, with a 10 by 10, knows that Tupatinho will be fine in that fight. Jamin says he doesn't care if Tupatinho wants to be the tough guy. Just don't mess with him. And Jamin completes the warning, saying that his life is already hard enough without the presence of the tough guy. The tough guy still on the ground looks Jaminho straight in the face and tells him not to pretend to be so strong and says that from now on he's in big trouble. And Jaminho, with his hand on his hip, looks at him with disdain and says, "Really? But Jaminho is very smart, as you can see." And he forgot that there are more people in the fight, and he gets hit so hard on the back of the neck that it feels like his soul is going to leave his body. And the guy with a baseball bat laughs in Jaminho's face and asks if Jaminho thought they were just here for decoration. After that, he starts sweating drops of ketchup, or ketchup is coming out of his nose. At this moment, the bully starts to smile because Jaminho is at his feet, and he asks if the hit Jaminho took hurt. The bully says he bets the hit Jaminho took hurt a lot, and says Jaminho only got beaten because he shows off at school, and that from now on he will show Jaminho his place at school. Jaminho, very angry, tells him to go screw himself. Patinho. He looks right at Jaminho's face and says, "You bastard, do you want to keep getting beaten?" Tupatinho, with a smile on his face, says he wants to see how long Jaminho can take it, and he orders his friends to finish off Jaminho. I honestly don't know how Tupatinho's friends are going to finish off Jaminho since they don't have eyes, or maybe they wanted to save on paint, and a nice beating session begins. Suddenly, Tupatinho sees a light in front of him, but he thinks he's imagining things, when suddenly several glowing spheres start to appear near Tupatinho, and he starts wondering, what could this be? Tupatinho looks around and sees that more white spheres are appearing. Meanwhile, the free massage session continues happening. The masseurs are noticing what's happening. However, Tupatinho sees that something is wrong because there are too many bright lights, and they shine so brightly that Tupatinho puts his hand in front of his face to avoid seeing that light. Suddenly, they stop because one saw something flash, another saw nothing, and another asked Tupatinho what that was. Tupatinho responds by saying he doesn't know anything. The only thing he saw was a flash, and it scared him a lot. Fallen to the ground, Jaminho continued with a fierce look. However, Tupatinho thinks he's still fine and wants to continue the massage session. Gently stepping on Jaminho's head, he tells him to stay on the ground. And only after that, Tupatinho had a look of happiness. Suddenly, a guy appears next to Tupatinho, saying, "Man, 20 years have passed, and nothing has changed here." Tupatinho gets a big scare from the guy who appeared out of nowhere next to him, and the guy starts analyzing Tupatinho, saying that the uniforms haven't changed at all. Tupatinho, not understanding anything, asks, "Who are you, bum?" And the guy, not understanding anything, asks, "Bum? What do you mean?" And the guy who appeared out of nowhere continues speaking, "Is this how snotty brats like you talk to your veterans?" And Jaminho starts watching the whole scene, trying to understand what's happening. The guy who appeared out of nowhere is already less angry, and says they just had a peak moment. So, he's going to forgive what they just said. But then the little brat speaks to the guy who appeared out of nowhere. "And who cares that you're a veteran?" The little brat, trying to intimidate the guy who appeared, tells him to mind his own business and keep walking, and wonders why a bum is getting involved in that matter. And the little brat asks the guy who appeared out of nowhere if he's falling for the freshman's tricks. The little brat tells the guy who appeared out of nowhere to get lost, or else he'll show him his place. Suddenly, the guy who appeared out of nowhere asks if all the kids these days are like him, without manners. And he adds more, saying that they shouldn't be talking like that to their veteran. On close. He calls it nonsense and tells him to scram. Throws a punch at the chest of the guy who appeared out of nowhere. However, the punch did nothing and his hand stayed stuck on his chest. And this makes the guy who appeared out of nowhere very angry, and he grabs Tupatinho's arm and says if he keeps being a jerk, he's going to break his arm. Tupatinho breaks free from the protagonist's hands and asks if he's lost his mind. The guy who appeared is protagonist, and Jae-minho, the punching bag, is not the protagonist. Tupatinho brutally charges at the protagonist, threatening to bruise him, and throws a very well-placed punch at the protagonist's face. But the protagonist is very strong and very good at fighting, and he dodges without any difficulty. Tupatinho is left confused about how he missed like that, and the protagonist tells Tupatinho that he should have stopped while he was going easy on him. And he tells Tupatinho that he should treat his senior like a little finger, looks at him, and must be thinking, this guy has something wrong in his head, so... The protagonist looks at Tupatinho and says he thinks he's the type who only learns through getting beaten up. Then, the protagonist makes a gesture with his hands and starts speaking a language that the others don't understand. Do you have it? I looked after the Sobus. Transform this cadet form into a fool. But no. And everyone is watching the crazy protagonist, raising his hands and making strange gestures with his fingers. And the protagonist is using his fingers, snapping them to one side, to the other, and nothing happens. And everyone is wondering what this crazy guy is doing. The protagonist, who hasn't said his name yet, looks at his hand and says that the spell isn't working, and between a little laugh, he exclaims, "Oh, really? It didn't work? It's ridiculous. Nowadays, huh?" He keeps talking to the protagonist, telling him not to act like he's something in this life, since he's just a little nobody. And the protagonist is there, snapping to one side, snapping to the other in complete emptiness. And of course, everyone was already thinking he was an idiot, a big idiot. And the protagonist made his last move, looked to the side, saw that magic wouldn't work, and those guys were calling him an idiot. So, the protagonist says he has no choice, since there's no magic, he'll go with melee, and prepares a supreme flick. And the little guy was thinking, what's this crazy guy trying to do? When suddenly, he takes a supreme flick and goes flying like a ragdoll. Tupatinho flies several meters and crashes hard into the concrete, breaking the concrete with his body. Jae-minho, who is good for nothing, is left speechless, as are the extras, Tupatinho's helpers. After a supreme flick, Tupatinho went to sleep, and the protagonist, with his finger coming out with force, says, "Te emovar, pctuatnovigrad." Oops, I think that line is from another game I play. And with a smile on his face, he prepares the new supreme flick and asks who will be next. Jae-minho is trembling with what he saw, and it is soon shown to us that the supreme flick went wild, as all the other three extras were already on the ground, and our friend Tupatinho is still sleeping. Jae-minho is very surprised by the protagonist's strength, as he took down all four with a single finger, and the protagonist is all smiles because he taught those fools a lesson. And Jae-minho, who has never seen such a crazy guy, wonders who this madman is, but humbly, Jae-minho thanks him for the help. And our protagonist says it was nothing, and starts looking at Jae-minho, and Jae-minho, as a target, says it's all fine. His head is quite resilient, and the protagonist says that's not it. He's not asking about his head. He wants to know what today's date is. And Jae-minho is surprised by the question, and the protagonist asks again, what is today's date? And Jae-minho says today is September 10th, and the protagonist asks, of what year? 2021. Hearing this, the protagonist is astonished, and he tells Jae-minho that he was summoned in 2016. So, it should be around 2036, since I spent 20 years. The protagonist, not knowing what was going to happen, does the math, because only 5 years have passed here on Earth, while he lived 20 years on the planet of all time. The protagonist says it's better this way, and Jae-minho, he doesn't understand why he said those things. The protagonist says goodbye to Jae-minho saying, later, I'm out, it's us, bye, and gives a warning to Jae-minho telling him not to get beaten up from now on. And Jae-minho, the protagonist walk away asks what the hell is he? And the protagonist, already in me, not seeing I ask what he is doing now. I'm good at this special effect of snapping. Fingers, I'm awesome. I can snap my fingers like no one else. I'm practically the master of finger snapping.
What kind of trip is this, dude?
And the protagonist, snapping fingers, now repeats teleport, teleport. Watching, I think he seems crazier than a student. Suddenly, the protagonist stops snapping his fingers and looks at Jae-minho. Jae Minho gets goosebumps. Jae Minho wonders why the protagonist is coming back. That guy is really strange, he's approaching me. Getting close to Jae Minho, the protagonist asks what his name is, and he introduces himself. I am Jae Minho, but you all here in the story are calling me Jae Minho. So, you can keep calling me Jae Minho. But I'm not your Jae Minho from Chavez, okay? Then, the protagonist speaks. Hey Jae Minho, since I saved you, could you lend me some money? And Jae Minho can't believe what he just heard. And that's it. Strangely, he says it seems like he returned too early, and can't materialize any magic in that place. And Jae Minho thinks this is bad for him because he just moved with a very strange creature. Then the protagonist starts telling his story. He says he was in a world very different from theirs. And he just got teleported back to Earth for personal reasons, which is why he returned to Earth. And the protagonist continues with his explanation, saying that it seems there was some kind of problem with the mana handling system during the process of returning to Earth, and he concludes. If the process had gone right, he would have been teleported in front of his house, and so, the protagonist explains that he can't conjure any magic in that place. That's what Jae Minho was thinking to himself. He couldn't say that. Cleverly, Jae Minho sends the good stuff. He asks how much he needs, and the protagonist says he needs 2,000 years. Jae Minho slipped up. He only had a 5,000 note, and the protagonist took his 5,000 note, and also took Jae Minho's phone number. And the protagonist thinks about how nice Jae Minho is, and assures that he will pay back what he owes, since he even took the phone number to return the money. The protagonist looks at his reflection in a glass, and realizes that only 5 years have passed here on Earth, and he thinks it's a good thing not much time has passed here. And he knows this is good because his family will definitely recognize him. Doing those math calculations like the king of mathematics, he realizes he is 24 years old, but his parents are probably around 50 years old. And Sor, his youngest sister, must be about 7 years old. Now, the scene shifts to a subway station. As he approaches the station, the protagonist sees many military personnel and wonders if there was an accident inside the subway station. Since he can't come to any conclusion, the protagonist sees 2 students passing by, and decides to ask them some questions. He asks what the soldiers are doing in front of the subway station. Did something happen there? The girls, not understanding the question, look at each other in astonishment. And laughing at the protagonist, they reply that it's normal for soldiers to be guarding the entrance to the dungeon. And they ask if the protagonist has been in a coma all this time. That's when the protagonist, looking clueless, doesn't understand anything, and he starts wondering what they are talking about. Since the protagonist can't take the subway, he plans to take a taxi. However, after walking another block, he sees another subway station where there are no soldiers in front, and decides to go down into the subway station. With his boot. Very fancy for a woman, and I think this boot is for women, right? And he finds the subway station locked, padlocked. And he doesn't understand what's happening because it's daytime. The subway station should already be open, and this makes the protagonist even more suspicious, as he thinks there was some kind of accident inside the subway station. However, by coincidence of the script or the power of protagonism, the key to the subway entrance is right there beside him. And of course, the protagonist wasn't going to let that pass by, right? Since the key just spawned out of nowhere next to him, or someone ran to the bathroom and left the key there. Stylish feminine boots. And we go inside the subway station. The protagonist notices that the subway is completely empty. There's no one working in the subway, and he says it looks like they've closed the entire subway station. The protagonist thinks he shouldn't have entered and tries to leave the subway station, and receives an alert that he has entered a dungeon at the station's exit. I don't know how to pronounce that name there, no. Suddenly, the protagonist widens his eyes because a system panel appears in front of him out of nowhere. Still curious, the protagonist keeps wondering what that could be, and he remembers the girls, when they said it's normal for soldiers to be at the entrance of the dungeon to protect it. That's when he realizes he entered a dungeon. And the protagonist receives another system announcement, saying that this dungeon has already been completed, so basic monsters will be summoned. And he wonders, monsters in the subway? What happened to Earth in the last 5 years, huh? So, the protagonist tries to go back. However, the dungeon is already blocked. There are only 2 ways to leave the dungeon, with the special dungeon exit stone and with the return stone, which is at the end of it. After touching the gate, the protagonist receives a system message saying that he doesn't have any return stone. So, the protagonist realizes he made a big mistake and knows that if he wants to get out of there, he'll have to clear the entire dungeon to find the return stone. So, since there's no other way, the protagonist looks into the dungeon and says, "Let's go," right? The protagonist looks into the darkness and thinks it's just his imagination, but it seems like the monsters are going to appear out of nowhere, and claws start coming towards the protagonist, and he quickly realizes that something is coming his way. Suddenly, a wolf dog, a very fierce creature, appears chasing after the protagonist. And he, purely by instinct, dodges, and that big-eared wolf keeps growling at the protagonist. The protagonist tries to use a binding spell. However, it fails, And the big-eared dog, taking advantage of this, makes a fierce leap at the protagonist. The protagonist seems like he hasn't learned. Even without magic, he tries to cast another spell and dodges again. When the protagonist stops in front of the big-eared dog, he decides to take a good look at the creature and is startled now that he's looking directly at the monster. And he recognizes the big-eared dog as a Draybit. The Draybit, full of fury, jumps at the protagonist for the third time. Meanwhile, the protagonist is thinking, why is a creature that should be an Alfie here on Earth? Suddenly, the protagonist looks to the side and, miraculously, there's a crowbar. Brand new, just waiting for the protagonist to dodge the Drubbit's attack. Once again, the protagonist grabs his crowbar. Now, things have really gotten crazy. The protagonist has a crowbar against a big-eared dog. The protagonist is only thinking about one thing, killing that damn big-eared dog, and the dog, thirsting for blood, leaps at the protagonist. But this time, the protagonist is armed and, with his crowbar, pierces the skull of the Drubbit fatality. Scorpion wins flawless, victor. And with a very satisfied face splattered with blood, the protagonist says he can't materialize magic, but a drat is nothing to him. But it doesn't end there. From the shadows, new legs emerge and the protagonist quickly turns to face whoever is coming and prepares for combat. But this time, it's not one drat, but 4. However, for the protagonist, this is just fun, because the drats are nothing compared to him. The protagonist knows, if it's just drats, he can handle them with ease. Now, if ours isn't strong enough to appear, then things might change a bit. After killing the last of the 4 drats, the protagonist leveled up, and he is very surprised by the news. However, this was already expected, since he regressed from level 99 to level 1. And now we are shown the protagonist's status window. And the protagonist realizes that he returned to level 1. However, his strength, dexterity, vitality, intelligence, everything remains as it was before. His basic attributes were not reset. And the protagonist has accumulated 99 contribution points, which he hasn't used yet. In other words, it's like those games where you reincarnate and become stronger to level up again. And certainly the protagonist will become much more overpowered than he was before. And now, as a beginner, the protagonist knows he has a long climb ahead. And another thing, the protagonist realizes that his Necromancer skill was transferred. So, he brought his Necromancer skill to this new world. It's an evolution. He reached level 0, killed 5 little dogs, and is already at level 1. So, he's going to take the opportunity to level up, since these things from the planet Alphen are wandering around his. Hey protagonist. He was looking at his status window, trying to figure out what this transferred means in front of his Necromancer class. But I've already told you what it is. He brought his Necromancer class from the planet Alpha, but something even more overpowered happened. In exchange for going from level 99 to level 1, status and skill points were created. The protagonist received a complete hack kit. He received transferred skills, a summoning combination box, and to top it off, he received achievement stores. For those who don't know what that is, let's poke around to see what it is. And we're shown the combination box, which looks a lot like that Minecraft crafting table. Then, the protagonist opens the achievement store and sees that he has 5 achievement points. This store didn't exist for him in Alphen, and he sees that it's an online store, and it's really cool. The protagonist starts to decide what his priorities are, and knows that he needs to acquire skills, as his top priority. The protagonist knows that if he wants to find the return loss, he needs the skill, Search. And to face the monsters, he needs the skills to detect and summon Skeleton Warrior. All of this is already enough. Each skill costs 10 points, and he only has 5 achievement points, so each creature he kills gives him 1 achievement point. The way, then, is to take down whoever is in front of him and gather points to buy these initial skills. But first, the protagonist decides to allocate the points he has, since he has 99 points. Let's distribute. The protagonist decides to allocate his points to basic survival stats, as he doesn't have a class yet. So, all 99 points were distributed, leaving him with 0 points remaining. And at the same moment, he feels a drastic change in his body, and the protagonist is impressed with the strength he has now and makes several slashes in the air. So, this crowbar is going to be very useful. The protagonist is eager to destroy the creatures with his crowbar. The protagonist has a clear goal, to kill the monsters to earn achievement points, and has the first skill to be chosen. The skill he seeks, because with it, he can find the return stone. Let's start killing Drebbit to be able to buy the skill. With his stylish little boots, women's model, the protagonist advances towards the Drebbit. But the Drebbit are also very eager and advance towards the protagonist. And of course, the protagonist will thank his friend Drebbit for coming voluntarily to his death. Finishing off his last Drebbit, the protagonist feels a bit tired. Now leveling up to level 3, the protagonist thinks these creatures won't stop appearing. However, he's fine killing them all. Just a little tired. More than 20 are already gone. Drebbit. So, he buys the skills Search and Detection and starts using them right away to try to find the return stone. The protagonist is disappointed because there is no return stone nearby. The protagonist knows that the only place left is the subway's lower level. Looking down the stairs, he sees several pointy-eared puppies, and he knows he has to go down there. If he wants to find the return stone, then the protagonist knows he can't face them head-on alone, since there are too many of them. So, with a sly grin, our Necromancer decides to show his true style, and he buys the skill book. Summon Skeleton Soldier. The protagonist can command up to 9 soldiers. To summon a skeleton soldier, he needs a body. So, each Dravite body can become a skeleton soldier. And now, the artist forgot that he had allocated 10 meta points and 9 control points, and decides to put 5 in each. After doing that, the protagonist looks at the bodies of the dead dreads and uses the famous phrase of every summoner, rise. Nothing like a necromancer without a necromancer. So, the protagonist starts to smile, because he knows that now it won't be just him, it will be him plus 5. So, let's go for the first hunt after a long time. The protagonist orders the skeletons to advance, and he follows behind, using his skeletons as a shield. And the drubbits fall right into the protagonist's trap and jump on the first skeleton to tear it apart. However, the skeletons are level 1, and they have difficulty facing the drabbits. The protagonist observes how the drabbits easily tear apart his skeletons. However, he only needs his skeletons to serve as a shield for him, because he will handle the rest. The protagonist has faced these drabbits several times and knows that his first attack is the most lethal. Then, after the drabbits' first attack, the protagonist uses the opening to easily kill 2 at once. And so, he uses these 2 bodies to summon 2 more new skeletons. Thus, he has 6 skeletons, with 1 missing an arm. There, the one missing an arm is at the back. Since the little dogs don't think, they charge at the skeletons. After that, the protagonist uses that well-known tactic. He uses his skeletons to block the first attack of the drubbit, then goes in and kills them all. And then, he summons more skeletons again. There's no way he can lose, since this is very overpowered. He already has 9 skeletons. Now that he has killed all the drubbit, he uses his ability to search for the return pair and finds it very close to him. The scene shifts to the exit of this dungeon, and we see a guy coming back from the bathroom. This is the guard who forgot the key for the protagonist to take. Nothing like a half-hour bathroom break. The clueless extra notices that the dungeon door's lock is open, and he becomes desperate, wondering what happened. He concludes that a civilian entered the dungeon, and the clueless guy knows he's in trouble because he neglected his duty. He left his post in front of the dungeon door. The clueless guy starts calling his superiors to ask for help, when suddenly, the dungeon's return portal begins to open, and the clueless guy is startled by the protagonist emerging from the portal. Not knowing what's happening, the protagonist starts walking towards the clueless guy, and the clueless guy asks if he is an awakened one. The protagonist says he doesn't know what an awakened one is, tells the clueless guy his name, opens the gate, and leaves. The scene shifts to an alley at the exit of another dungeon, and we see a person with a bag full of bloodstones. And he says that today's haul was very good because he entered a dungeon clandestinely. This adventurer knows he should register before entering a dungeon, as the guilds, which own the dungeons, charge very high fees. Therefore, he considers himself very clever because he enters any dungeon he wants, goes in without registering, and then sells the bloodstones on the black market. And these bloodstones,
blood, they're worth 4 times their value on the black market. And this adventurer, who didn't mention his name, says that only an idiot sells the stones on the regular market. Suddenly, he hears a voice calling him a piece of shit rat. The person asks when he's still doing this thing. It's a woman speaking to him, but she's kind of in the dark and he can't see her. He asks who she is, and a beautiful woman appears, asking, "Do you want to know who?" She's a very beautiful redhead, who says she's the Reaper who came to take him to death. Wow, what a well-drawn character, huh? Hey, Jerzinho, take your eyes off, Jerzinho. This woman is the captain of the team. Bird, Escarli, Lee, Ione. I'll call her Ivone, to make it easier. I hope I remember that name, Ivone. Ivone, beautiful and delightful, asks the adventurer how he dares to steal stones from her guild. And she asks if he's sure he doesn't want to die. This adventurer recognizes Ivone and says he knows she's from the Varong Guild. Interesting, in the previous work, there was also Varong, now. There's a Varong Guild. Joazinho knows Ivone and knows she's a shrew who loves to kill. And Ivone tells the thief, since he knows her, it's better to come without resisting. And come quietly, no fuss. But a thief always likes to run, right? So, he prepares a spell to cast on Ivone. And after casting his spell in her direction, he says he's not foolish enough to go without a fight. And he hurls several ice stakes in her direction. Ivone doesn't even lose her composure and manages to dodge them with ease. The guy, who is very angry, is already running at the corner. But Ivone is a monster of a woman. And she has super speed. And she said to the little thief, since you want to die, then die, and she moves to Montenegro on the guy, cutting Jaminho, and Ivone speaks to the dying man. You should have come when I told you to come here on time. So, let's grab the loot, the cell phone from the tongue. Ivone calls, and the coward wants to know if the guild authorized someone to enter there without registering, and the coward asks for personal confirmation. Meanwhile, our protagonist is at the bus stop, wondering what the bus number he needs to take to go home is. Ivone is also thinking about him, wondering who would be the rat that had the courage to invade her guild's dungeon. The scene changes and we see the protagonist arriving by bus, where his home would be. Still wearing his fancy women's boots, he walks blurry-eyed to his house. On this path, he thinks it might be a dungeon, or rather, a monster. This is not the world he knew 5 years ago. What the hell happened to the world in the last 5 years that I wasn't here? And so, the protagonist walks towards his house, and hopes that nothing bad has happened to his family. When he arrives in front of his house, he gets a big shock because he knows he didn't get the place wrong. But, where is his house? He stands there, desperate, in front of a huge building. In 5 years, many things have happened. He is surprised because they built a very large building in 5 years, in the place where his house was. And he wonders if his family is somewhere else or if they are living there. On that facade is written the name of a company, so it's definitely an office building. The afternoon was already fading, and he was too tired to find his family that day. Suddenly, his stomach growls, and he realizes that he walked the entire day and hasn't eaten anything. So, he went to a fast food place, called Nice to Go, and eats that instant noodles. Makes you want to eat hot instant noodles now, huh? And he devours those noodles with relish, as it had been 20 years since he last ate instant noodles, or anything that reminded him of home. And after he ate the big bowl of noodles and drank a Coke, that's when he truly feels he's back on Earth. The protagonist realizes he's almost out of money, and he says he doesn't want to go to a sauna and doesn't have enough money for an internet cafe. Then he looks at the change from the meal and sees that he'll have to camp out in the subway. But suddenly, he remembers that he can't even camp in the subway because all the subway stations have turned into dungeons. Suddenly, the power of protagonism acts again. Meanwhile, the protagonist is lamenting, saying he doesn't even have money to buy dinner and only has enough for a cup of instant noodles. The scene shifts to Jaminho. He's thinking about the protagonist, asking him for money and thinks that there was something wrong with that guy. And so, Jaminho enters a diner, which, by coincidence, or the power of protagonism, is the same one where the protagonist is. Jaminho, upon realizing that the crazy guy is there, is shocked, and the protagonist realizes it's his lucky day because his walking bank has just arrived. Jaminho, all shaky, thinks he must have done something wrong to run into that guy twice on the same day. So, Jaminho turns his back to leave. The protagonist quickly gets up and grabs Jaminho by the back, saying that Jaminho arrived at the perfect moment because he was about to call him, knowing that his friend Jaminho would never let him down. And Jaminho, who is not at all close to him, asks what he wants from him. The protagonist asks, "Are your parents home?" And Jaminho asks why he wants to know that. The protagonist says he needs to tell his parents that he was being beaten up by 4 people. Then, suddenly, Jaminho says that his parents died. The protagonist, looking at that, says, "Oh, that's good." He doesn't even finish saying that's good, and looks to the side, holding his head with a pitying expression and says, "What a shame," the protagonist. Looking at Jaminho, he asks if he lives alone. The protagonist doesn't even want to know the answer and says, "Let's go," leaving Jaminho confused. He asks, "To where?" The protagonist, with a very straightforward attitude, says it's to his house, of course. The protagonist says he won't stay for free at his house and gives the last 3 coins to Jaminho. Jaminho looked at that incredulously, not believing it, and said to the protagonist, "Wait a minute, isn't that the money you took?" Jaminho hadn't even finished speaking. When a fist passes by him at high speed, he is shocked, frozen, standing still. Of course, it was the protagonist, and he said he saw a fly, showing the fly he caught next to Jaminho's head. Jaminho, pressured by the protagonist, sees no other way out, and takes the protagonist to his house. The scene shifts to the next day, to the school where the protagonist studied, and we see the protagonist talking with his former teacher. The teacher, looking at the protagonist, is very surprised that he is alive, as everyone thought he had died. The protagonist, with a smile on his lips, says, "How long has it been, Professor?" The teacher gets straight to the point and asks where and how he survived all this time. And he speaks again with the protagonist, saying that when he disappeared, everyone thought he had died. And the protagonist says that, technically, he died and came back to life. The protagonist tells the teacher that he has to take care of some things. And so, he asks if he can take a look at the student records. The scene shifts to room 3 on the second floor, or to room 2 on the third floor, where we see Jaeminho, the punching bag, talking to a beautiful girl. And Tupatinho, who apparently studies in the same class as him, is right behind, looking angry. The one who hits forgets, and the one who gets hit doesn't forget. Tupatinho, up until now, hasn't forgotten the puddle he got, the supreme poke. Tupatinho arrives with all his rudeness and asks the beautiful girl, who was talking to Jaeminho, to leave because he needs to talk to him. Giving Jaeminho a loving hug, Tupatinho calls Jaeminho a little turd, and says he was very lucky yesterday because that random crazy guy came out of nowhere and saved his skin. And he says they're going to finish that conversation from yesterday. And Jaeminho, like every punching bag, stupidly wants to take the beating quietly without saying anything to anyone, and tells him not to make a scene in the room when he meets with Tupatinho. At that moment, Tupatinho gets very angry and says, "What do you mean, don't make a scene?" Everyone in the room starts to hear Tupatinho yelling at Jaeminho. Jaeminho, who has already lost all courage to fight, was grabbed by the hair by Tupatinho, who says he still hasn't realized the situation he's in, and that this time, he's going to break some of his ribs. When suddenly, someone arrives at the door and tells them to stop right now. The protagonist says they arrived at a perfect moment. Tupatinho is very angry and full of courage. You can tell he doesn't even know what truck hit him. The protagonist tells all the pathetic bullies to follow him. The bully came back because he only got a flick and doesn't even know what happened after that. Now, if the protagonist had destroyed both him and his will to fight, then yes, he would never come back. But that's what the protagonist is going to teach in this story, and you'll see that he's going to annihilate many wills to fight. The scene shifts to the school rooftop, and there are several extras just watching. Although there are 2 extras there who can't look because they have no eyes. They are wondering why one guy alone picked a fight with Tupatinho's gang. And Jaeminho wonders what that person is doing here at the school. Meanwhile, we see the hilarious scene of the protagonist dodging Tupatinho's punches. And Tupatinho, who still hasn't come to his senses, keeps telling the protagonist's rat to stop dodging his punches. And the protagonist thinks that, whether on Alpha or on Earth, people like Tupatinho will always exist everywhere. People who become arrogant because of their influence or power. And Tupatinho is there, giving it his all to try to hit the protagonist. And he's not even sweating. The protagonist knows that Tupatinho acts like he's all that in a fight, without knowing his own place. And this makes the protagonist remember a guy named Cassius. Cassius, from the Elfie Union. He was this masked, blonde, elf guy, who never cuts his nails. What an ugly nail is that, huh? Look at his nail. Look at the nail. I'm going to zoom in. Why he's not showing the other hand, right? Because he broke a nail, cut the other nails on that hand, so he's not showing the other hand. Cassius was the necromancer of the massacre. He was an immoral soul reaper. But Cassius did something wrong. He coveted the Prota's territory and did everything to unite against the Prota. Returning from the déjà vu, we see Tupatinho, all sweaty, and he couldn't land a single punch on the Prota, and the Prota is just the way I like a Prota to be. He's not a coward and doesn't forgive his enemies. I will never bring you a work in which the protagonist is a wimp. Tupatinho yells to his gang. Hey you guys, how much longer are you going to stand there? Come and attack that bastard. And the Prota says there's only one way to deal with people like that. Meanwhile, all 4 of them advance towards the Prota. And how's the Prota? A little smile on his face, a sandal that really gets in the way of fighting on his foot. Hey, subscriber, a tip for you. If you ever get into a fight, don't go wearing sandals like that, okay? Go barefoot, because otherwise, you're going to lose. And so, the Prota, which is almost like Sun 2, explains that you should return what people have done to you 10 times worse and with overwhelming force, nothing less than that. So, it's time for a slap in the face. And the Prota starts handing out slaps in the face. Tupatinho is the first. The Prota is only not punching them because he's very strong. If he punched each of them, they'd die. So, it's a slap in the face of humiliation, really. And we see that Tupatinho's bully is there, trembling all over. The Prota tells him to come at him, not just stand there. Wasn't he wanting him to react? Well, now he's reacting. Tupatinho gets really pissed and prepares a big punch. Then, it was just a beating from there on. Everyone is down and groaning. And the prota is calling them trash. The prota says they're nothing, that they only know how to make a lot of noise while getting beaten, and tells them to groan quietly. Suddenly, the prota's sixth sense starts to tingle, or it's just the plot, as a taxi stops in front of the school. He is very surprised to see who gets out of the taxi, and we are shown a middle-aged woman who, in a hurry, heads towards the school. And the prota immediately recognizes her and calls her mom. This is the most touching scene you might see at some point. A mother who thought her son had died. She finds him alive after many years. The prota's mother bursts into tears, and he is also very emotional, but doesn't shed a single tear. I think he might need a psychologist. According to his mother's words, right after he disappeared 5 years ago, dungeon outbreaks occurred all over the world, where all subway stations turned into dungeons at the same time. And she informs him that his father passed away after being caught in the middle of a dungeon outbreak. His father was coming back from work and was killed by a monster. Thus, his mother had to live alone while taking care of Soa. Soa is his little sister. And his mother continues the explanation, saying that their family didn't have much money. And after his younger sister fell ill, the financial reserves they had quickly ran out. So, she had to sell the house and rent this small apartment to afford her sister's treatment. But thank God, now her sister is doing very well, she is cured. After the day of the dangerous outbreak, every single day was just pain and suffering. After that, the protagonist's mother says she's going to the daycare to pick up his younger sister and tells him not to go anywhere. If it were my son, I would take him along to the daycare, no questions asked. 5 years without seeing, I would take him along. And the protagonist stays there, observing, where his mother lives. And we are shown the small apartment where his mother is living with his little sister. It's just that and the bathroom. The protagonist thinks that he can feel just by looking at the difficulty his mother faces being responsible for a family on her own. This room was really very small, for the whole family to sleep. And the protagonist looks at closed boxes on the wall. And there were many boxes, and they took up an entire wall. When he opens them to see what they are, there were many things of his and his father's. These things, his mother couldn't throw away. And the protagonist knows very well why his mother doesn't throw them away. It would be like throwing away all the memories of her son and husband. And the protagonist is heartbroken. Finally, his mother arrives with his little sister. And the mother tells the little one to say hi to her older brother. And his sister, very shyly, says hi to her brother. And he, of course, makes a silly and happy brother face. The protagonist, placing his hand on her head, says, "Oh, have you grown so much? Do you remember me?" The protagonist says he changed his sister's diaper many times when she was little. The little sister, with an angry face, says she doesn't pee anymore. The mother lets the little one play with her brother. Meanwhile, she goes to prepare a very tasty meal for the two of them. And the little one asks if mom isn't going to the restaurant today. And the mother says no. Today is her day off. The protagonist has never felt so much joy. Night falls, and everyone gets ready to sleep. Lights out, mother and daughter sleeping. However, the protagonist can't close his eyes. He can't sleep. He keeps thinking about what happened 20 years ago, when he was summoned to Alphen without any apparent reason. Alphen was a world similar to a video game. And the protagonist had to fight more bravely than anyone else. And he fought in every possible way to achieve his victory. And to survive against weak monsters. And all the beings of Alphen. After much fighting, the protagonist managed to become a max-level necromancer. And he had a territory all to himself, where he controlled everything, life and death. But then something happened, he couldn't see the end of his journey. Suddenly, the dimensional administrator summons the protagonist and asks if he wants to return to his planet. And he, without any attachment, says yes, and is instantly returned to Earth. And the protagonist only stayed alive with the hope of returning to Earth and seeing his family again. He just wished to have a normal happiness, like the one he had here on Earth. However, the Earth he returned to had changed a lot. And his father, because of this change, ended up dying. And his family was bankrupt and helpless. So, the protagonist set his first goal. He needs to earn a lot of money. And he thinks it will be easy because he survived on Alphen. A planet where if you're not strong, you don't survive a single day. So, for his family, he promises to change things. The next day, the protagonist is sitting with his stylish shoe or sandal, looking at the cell phone his mother gave him. And he starts researching about the awakened because he remembers the coward from the subway, who asked if he was an awakened. The protagonist remembers the conversation he had with the coward. The coward said he was scared to death, thinking a normal person had entered the dungeon. The coward asks why he entered a closed mine. This mine doesn't even drop bloodstones, it drops nothing. Then, we see that the coward made the protagonist fill out an entry log. And the protagonist becomes thoughtful, thinking about how to make money. The protagonist discovers that he is an awakened. So, he decides to focus on that to make money. For the sake of the plot, the protagonist sends a message to his mother, because no mother would let her son leave after that. The protagonist sends a message to his mother, saying that there's a guy who lives alone nearby, and he will live with him while he prepares for the awakened exam. In his mind, the protagonist intends not to be a burden to his mother and thus promises to earn money to bring her some peace. The protagonist, looking at the phone number, starts to say that he's sorry for bothering this person, but he plans to pay him back later. And the person who answers says, "The funeral fall goes with God. Do you want to buy a coffin or a complete service?" The protagonist is left confused. Funeral home, goes with God, what do you mean? Paper, looks at the phone, looks at the paper, looks at the phone, and they are the same, and the person is there. Hello, funeral home, goes with God, speak up, what do you want to say? The protagonist innocently says, "I want to talk to Jaminho." And the guy was already out of patience, said, "Jaminho, there's no Jaminho here. If you're not going to buy our service, hang up the phone." Of course, Jaminho didn't give him the right number. He's going to give the right number to a protagonist he doesn't even know. And this protagonist, his name, right? I'm tired of saying hero. The hero starts calling Jaminho a bastard because he gave him the wrong number. Night falls and we see a very beautiful apartment. It's Jaminho's house and he's arriving at his apartment. Jaminho keeps thinking that he couldn't thank the protagonist for saving him twice. And after that, Tupatinho and his gang never came near him again. Jaminho keeps thinking that the protagonist seemed like a psychopath, but he's definitely not a bad guy. And Jaminho bets that he must have managed to talk to his mother. Electronic lock. Jaminho enters his number and goes in. Jaminho enters all carefree when, suddenly, the protagonist is inside his house, and the protagonist says, "Hey Jaminho, how are you doing?" Jaminho is very surprised and doesn't understand what's happening, and he asks furiously, "How did you get into my house?" He said, "With the password, of course. I saw you entering the password." And Jaminho says that's trespassing. The protagonist says it's not trespassing because he tried to call him before, but it went to the wrong number he gave. Jaminho starts trembling, trying to say something. And the protagonist interrupts him and says he wants to ask him something. Grabbing another Ruffles chip, the protagonist says he's an awakened one. And Jaminho is very surprised and shouts, "You're an awakened one." And right after, Jaminho starts thinking that it's not a surprise, since the protagonist was very strong. And Jaminho wonders why he didn't think of that before. The protagonist keeps eating all of Jaminho's food and says, "Awakened ones make a lot of money, right?" Jaminho replies that yes, but it depends a lot on the dungeons. Then, the protagonist asks Jaminho to explain what he knows about the dungeons and about the awakened ones. And Jaminho says that he has to register as an awakened one at the association. And, after registering, he has to join a guild and only then can he go after the dungeons. Jaminho informs that there's also the option to be employed by the association or the Department of Administration. And the protagonist asks if he wouldn't make more money if he went into the dungeons to clear them by himself. And Jaminho says that's true. But that's very dangerous. So, the best option is to join a guild, and then enter the dungeon. The protagonist asks if he needs to take a test to join a guild. And before Jaminho can answer, he says he doesn't have time for that. He needs to make money quickly because his family needs money. And he says, "Man, if you don't want to join a guild, at least you have to join a team before entering a dungeon." And Jaminho explains that dungeons are very dangerous. Many people lose their lives in that place. Jaminho asks the protagonist to download an app on his phone, and the protagonist asks, "What's an app?" Jaminho doesn't even want to explain. He takes his phone and downloads the app for him. "Let me do it for you." Jaminho is very surprised and says that his phone is very old and very slow. Jaminho says he bets that this phone belongs to his mother or his sister, since this phone is very old. It seems like it was used by someone and, after it got so old, it was put in a corner. The protagonist says no, that this phone is a more recent release and that he bought this phone. And it was very expensive, by the way. And it was his mother who gave him the money. Jaminho says, release? Of course not. This phone was released more than 4 years ago. And Jaminho asks, did you happen to buy this phone as if it were new? And the protagonist is left speechless and just makes a very angry face. And remembers the wretched, smiling salesman who gave him that phone as if it were the latest release. The protagonist can only think of one thing. Getting back at that wretched salesman. Jaminho, after getting really frustrated, manages to install the app on the protagonist's phone. And opening the app, he shows the dungeon form and informs that with this app, he can see dungeon information, schedule, and also view their locations. And the protagonist says that now he will be able to find a dungeon and clear it by himself. And Jaminho informs for the second or third time, saying that he needs to classify himself as awakened first. And he informs once again that dungeons are very dangerous places. If he goes in there without any preparation, he could die. The protagonist breaks Jaminho's explanation sequence and asks, what is this? Is there an entrance fee for the dungeon? Jaminho says yes, that the minimum entrance fee for the dungeon is 36 Brazilian reals and it ranges from 36.00 Brazilian reals to 460 Brazilian reals. The protagonist looks at which dungeon is the cheapest, and he asks Jaminho, can you lend me some money? If Jaminho responds that I'm thinking, whoever has a bearded son is a cat, he would definitely die. The next day, at the Awakened Control Department, of course I know, he's Korean, the facade reads, Awakened Control Department. Trust. The protagonist introduces himself and goes to the awakened examination room. Many people are watching the protagonist and he starts to emit a very sinister black aura. And everyone is astonished to see that black aura, not knowing what's happening now. Even Senso back there is surprised. I don't know why. And the protagonist, with a protagonist's air, begins his summoning. And we see a very beautiful and cute rabbit dead on the ground. And the protagonist says, rise. And suddenly, a necromancer summons his fighter skeleton. And the sinister skeleton starts to appear from the place where the rabbit's body is. All the spectators are left with their mouths open. I bet you're wondering why a skull comes out of a rabbit. Then, comes the explanation from the father here. He uses the bodies as a sacrifice to summon those skulls from the underworld. Any body he summons can even be an elephant. A skull will come out because it only serves as a sacrificial ritual. And a level 1 skull comes out with level 1 status. The protagonist is all happy, thinking he's great because his summoning was perfect. He summoned his fighter skull. And the warrior skull already comes with a bone sword in hand. It must be very sharp. The protagonist's level 1 skull is very imposing with its glowing eyes. And the specialist speaks.
As you can see, it's just a necromancer.
And an extra is very surprised, as it's the first time he's seen a necromancer up close. The fighter says this.
Now, I want to see your power. Destroy that goblin.
And the protagonist is very surprised to see a goblin hologram. And he keeps looking, thinking about how he's going to do it. For his skull to attack a hologram. So he goes and says, all right, skeleton soldier, show your strength and attack that hologram. The skeleton, with all the fury in its eyes, sprints very quickly towards that hologram and goes right through it, since the skeleton didn't see anything.
The examiner, seeing that scene, says to him, you're rank F, the damn rank F.
The protagonist is left confused and receives his rank F card. The protagonist, not knowing anything about rank classification, asks if rank F is a very high rank. And he explains. Look, there are 2 ways to explain. Which one do you want? The easier one or the harder one? The protagonist says, tell me the harder one. Don't you have your favorite team that's in the Brasileiro? The protagonist says, yes, what about it? So, you take the standings, turn them upside down, and your team is in first place. And the protagonist says, what? He says, rank F is the lowest rank there is. So, you are the lowest rank. The skeleton you summoned, it's a very low rank. So, you deserve rank F. And the examiner tells him not to be too upset. Because his ability is special, so he will make a big difference in a team. And the protagonist thinks that the rank doesn't matter, because he just wants to enter a dungeon. And now, finally, we are shown the protagonist's name, Kamhun Jin, whom we will call Jean. No, we will not call him Jean.
From Jean, we will call him Kam. The scene shifts to exit 7 of the subway station, and the protagonist is looking at a 2-star dungeon. And we see the protagonist saying that this dungeon must be really good because he had entered it by mistake, was level 1, and he managed to handle it with ease.
Suddenly, an awakened person appears near the protagonist, asking if he is alone and making a proposal if he wants to join his group. He says there are 7 people in his group and that there's 1 spot left. And if he wants, that spot can be his. The protagonist says he's fine, and that he will go in alone. The group leader asks the protagonist why he would waste the entry fee money like that, as there is a time limit to stay inside the dungeon and also a limit to how many bloodstones you can mine alone. The leader of that group asks Kong if he is a new miner and asks what the protagonist's rank is. Kong replies that he is rank F. The group leader introduces himself as by Doko, and we will call him Doko. Doko tells the protagonist that he seems to have come there uninformed and without any planning, and suggests to the protagonist that he should join the group and use it as a learning experience, and tells the protagonist that he will ensure his safety. After that, we see a first group entering the dungeon. So, the protagonist group stays outside, waiting. And yes, the protagonist decided to enter with the group, because the entry fee for a 2-star mine alone is 27,000 reis. Therefore, since the protagonist doesn't have all the money, he will enter with the group. And we see the explanation that convinced the protagonist. Doche explains that when 8 people enter a dungeon, the cost is divided among 8 people. And if he enters alone, he will have to pay the full amount. So, since the protagonist knows little about a dungeon, he decides to enter with the group and learn as much as possible. A person in a hoodie, heavily armed, is wearing a hoodie to enter a dungeon, starts a conversation with the protagonist, and says that entering a dungeon is very stressful. And Kong, who is very serious, says that a man should not show nervousness, even if he is very nervous. And the guy in the hoodie starts to smile, and says that he is very confident. His name is shown, Kam Sunga Ranketh, a fireball creation skill user. Does he know? Little Toon? Because if he doesn't know, I'll teach him later, and we will call him Sunga. And we saw that Sunga was also invited to join the group. Sunga explains to the protagonist that he awakened 2 months ago. After that, he left school and started working officially as an awakened. Moments later, everyone is very surprised because the group that had entered earlier came out all messed up, and one of them was being helped by the others. And Sunga quickly concludes that some accident happened in that dungeon. The group members, with a lot of anger on their faces, were yelling at the dungeon doorman, saying that a goblin appeared and that it doesn't make any sense, there shouldn't be any goblin in that dungeon, and that they want their entrance fee back. Dorso watches the situation from a distance, and he knows that it's no use for them to shout because they won't get their money back. And he explains, as a good veteran, that sometimes a monster appears that isn't in the public information of the dungeon. And he explains that a goblin is a 2-star monster, but if you use some tricks, it's not impossible to defeat it. After that, without much delay, the group of adventurers prepares to enter the dungeon, and we are shown the interior of the dungeon. It's an abandoned subway station, with no one around. But at that moment, 3 angry goblins appear. I wanted to see that guy, the Goblin Slayer, in this dungeon. Our friend Sunga takes the lead and casts a fireball. Apparently, he doesn't know the little song. The fireball lands near the creatures and starts burning them. Doko begins to combo with his magic and uses Ignite. And Doko loves to ignite the eyes of the creatures. And he ignites the eyes of the goblins. A warrior charges forward and the archer shoots. I don't know if that's an archer or a female archer. Comment if it's an archer or a female archer. He does his part and shoots arrows at the goblins. Are you noticing the same as I am? Isn't it a bit much to kill 3 goblins? It's fire, explosion, arrows, while there's a warrior who, with all the ease in the world, slices the little goblins in half. And the protagonist's skeleton also appears, stabbing the little goblin in the chest with a sword. One of the extras says that Sunga's fireballs are very powerful, and also says that the protagonist's skeletons are faster than he imagined. And that, for sure, his skeleton is stronger than a rank F. And the protagonist smiles, thinking it's obvious that this skeleton is stronger because he used a lot of skill points to level up the skeleton. And it was worth it, right? Since it's no longer just one skeleton level 1, and the bloodstone excavation begins. 2 goblins are excavated. And Doko is very happy, because the bloodstones from the 2-star dungeon are excellent. And they have a very high drop rate. He says that with a bloodstone of that size, he can sell it for 20 notes. The protagonist is astonished. 20 notes? Are they worth that much? Each of those stones is worth around 200,000 ounces, which is the same as 6,800 reis. Doko is very happy. They are just at the entrance of the dungeon, and they've already hunted many bloodstones. Thinking that they had only killed 4 goblins with bag smells, Doko thinks that a 2-star dungeon can't even compare to a 1-star dungeon in terms of the amount of drop that falls. Definitely, a 2-star dungeon is much better than a 1-star one. The group is almost reaching the last level, and there's a nice surprise. The goblin they were expecting is actually a hobgoblin. And there it is, a hobgoblin, muscular, fit, a shaman, and full of followers. And Doko takes the lead, saying that they need to act very cautiously and follow the basic information as instructed. But for us, Candy has never faced a hobgoblin. He only read about it. Basic information, and Kong is there standing, just watching and observing. Kong gives a hint to proceed with great caution. And Doko, being a veteran miner, said that he is well familiar with the manual and knows that the goblin's main attack is magic. That being the case, we will be able to win very easily, because the ability of this little guy here, who has a difficult name that I won't say, the one in front here, is to raise barriers. Let's call him Inusalemesokles, or Little Barrier. Doko states that, with Little Barrier on the team, they are invincible against that hobgoblin. The protagonist is not there for trouble and keeps thinking, since the team group said, he won't do anything, he'll just watch and see what happens. The buff shaman decides to make his first attack. Upon casting his spell, Little Barrier starts doing his part. He creates a magical barrier to protect the group. The shaman, during his invocation, starts saying Papa Bakwagarfo, Papa Bakwagarfo, Papa Bakwagarfo. Pause the video and try to say it 3 times without making a mistake. And the hobgoblin throws a very strong lightning bolt at Little Barrier. Meanwhile, Dorso gives orders to the rest of the group, and everyone starts attacking the shaman, and Dorso throws fire into the shaman's eyes. Taking advantage of this opening, the warrior tries to attack, but the shaman is very good at fighting, and he defends against the warrior's attack. Our friend Sunga doesn't know how to throw a fireball. Fireball. That's a fireball. He doesn't know the little song. Kam, observing all of this, realizes that it's very dangerous, because on planet Alph, he encountered various monsters. And among them, there were many robgoblins. And he knows that robgoblins have intelligence above normal. And they are capable of using magic. However, what makes the robgoblin quite dangerous is not just magic, it's the level of command they have. It's an intelligent and superior command. After receiving this command, the goblins arm themselves and cautiously advance towards the enemies. And immediately, the whole group notices that the goblins are acting differently. Under the influence of the hobgoblins, an unregistered one appears and shoots a poisonous blowgun dart into Barrerin's neck. And he says that it hurts a lot, and the poison quickly spreads throughout Barrerin's body. The extra, whose gender is unclear, asks what's happening to Barrerin. I've never seen a poison like this, because Barrerin's head just exploded. Is this a poison or a alien offspring? Barrerinha falls lifeless, and the unregistered one decides to flee. And the protagonist starts to speak. That's why I said it's dangerous. What makes a hobgoblin very dangerous is not its physical ability or its magic, but its ability to command, its great intellect. A group of goblins that has a commander cannot be considered a normal 1-star monster. The hobgoblin orders its goblins to attack the group. Doche widens his eyes and, being a veteran full of courage, orders everyone to run. Let's get out of here, and each brave warrior flees in the most shameful way possible, except for our friend Sunga. He prepares another of his fireballs and throws it with great force in the direction of the goblins. The goblins, having a leader commanding them, didn't suffer any damage. Daso says it's no use fighting them and that they have to flee. One of the brave ones, who is already retreating, asks about Barrerinha, and Daso says that he's already dead and there's nothing more to be done for him. Let's run away. It's like a game of tag. Whoever is the last to run away is the ugliest, but the goblin says thank you. He doesn't stay still and starts to smile, concentrating his demonic mana. He says Papi Bakwagaro for the jumper, Papi Bakwagaro for the jumper, Papi Bakwagaro for the jumper. And he releases a lightning spell that bounces among the brave awakened ones who are fleeing, hitting squarely the one who dared to release a fireball. When Dorso saw that scene, he shouted even louder for everyone to run away, or else everyone will die, and they all fled, leaving their friend Sunga to be sacrificed. Sunga is there, lying face down, and the Robgoblin and Goblin Violator have just arrived. However, Kong hadn't run and was nearby, lurking, waiting for an opportunity. So, since they are just goblins, he comes out of his hiding place, takes out his crowbar, and says it's been a long time since he last hunted goblins, that he will really enjoy this, and he summons 4 skeletons to help. Robgoblin and goblins order their henchmen to kill the protagonist. And the protagonist knows how difficult it is to deal with a group of goblins that has a leader. So there's only one thing to do: kill the leader. The protagonist sprints towards the hobgoblin, and all the little-headed minions step in front, trying to stop him. But the protagonist also has his minions that he summoned. So, while the skeleton soldier takes care of the little goblins, the protagonist will deal directly with the hobgoblin. The protagonist jumps over the hobgoblin. The hobgoblin starts to speak and cast his lightning magic. However, the protagonist is much faster and is already very close to the hobgoblin, and he pierces the hobgoblin's head with the crowbar, killing him instantly. The protagonist, who is very tough, smiling, asked the hobgoblin's soul if he really thought waiting for his lightning ability to reset was a good idea. Learn how to raid. Always catch a creature on cooldown. If it's on cooldown, it's defenseless. Just kill it like he did with the hobgoblins, and the protagonist instantly rises to level 6. And he feels his attributes increasing exponentially. And he smiles, because he much prefers playing solo rather than in a group. And this way, his experience points rise very quickly, without stopping. Sunga, almost out of life, asks the protagonist for help. The protagonist observes this and heads towards Sunga. The protagonist is amazed because he's still alive after that lightning strike. And Sunga is asking the protagonist for help not to let him die. And the protagonist, looking at that situation, realizes he can gain some advantage and asks Sunga what he can do if he saves his life. Sunga says he won't tell anyone, and the protagonist replied, "Tell what, you wretch? That you are a Hank of the Awakened." Calm gets very upset and says he doesn't care about that. And the dying man asks, "So what does the protagonist want?" Khan stops and thinks for a moment, and says, "We're even with this," and shows his fingers to him. Looking at his hands, Sunga interprets that as the symbol of peace and asks, "Is it the symbol of peace?" The scene shifts to someone digging up the body of a goblin, and we see a bloodstone being extracted from yet another body. And it was Sunga, fully recovered, with a bag full of bloodstones, saying that his work is finally done. Kam is at a distance, asking if he has finished the work, and Sunga says yes, he has already collected all the bloodstones from the bodies. Sunga becomes pensive, wondering how such a strong person is rank F, and he deduces that the protagonist is at least rank D, as his combat skills are sufficient to hunt level 2 monsters on his own. And he keeps thinking that, in addition, Khan has the ability to summon skeletons and the ability to search for bloodstones. And most incredibly, he has a healing ability that completely restored me. Khan used an ability that absorbed something from the bodies and healed him instantly. And so, Sunga concludes that, given the variety of abilities, the protagonist could certainly even be a rank C. And Sunga is incredulous because it's only been 3 hours since the protagonist registered as an awakened one. Sunga hands the bag to the protagonist, and Kong asks if he knows how much all these bloodstones are worth. Sunga said approximately 8 million. 1. Of course, I've already done the math. 273,000 reis. It was a good deal. The protagonist invested 100,000 won and earned 8 million. Kong looks at Sunga and says, "All of this is mine. Got it?" And Sunga immediately agrees, and says, "Yes, of course, it's all his." Sunga finds it unbelievable how the protagonist is obsessed with money. And then we're shown the scene where the protagonist gives him the peace sign. And I left it for you to read the response the protagonist gave him. Kam says that Sunga owes him 2 million, 1 for saving his life. Then, they quickly find the return stone. The two soon prepare to leave the dungeon. And the protagonist's defensive system warns that a slight bloodlust has been detected. Then, Kong tells them to be more alert, as it seems there's an ambush underway. Sunga tells Kong that we've already gotten rid of all the monsters. So, it's not possible to have bloodlust here if it weren't for the protagonist. This Sunga would have died 5 more times. Kong, with his spider sense, tells the rats to stop hiding and show themselves. And, at the same moment, Dorso and the group present themselves and walk timidly towards the protagonist. Dorso, who is very deceitful, asks what happened if the two of them killed all the monsters. And the protagonist already warns Sunga not to get close, because they are planning to attack them as soon as they get closer. And Sunga says, "What are we going to do?" And the protagonist just watches that group standing in front of him, and he says, "Wow, you finally came back after leaving and running away." And with his tail between his legs, Khan says they should have waited in front of the barrier. Why are they coming down here? And Dorso, who is a fair-weather friend, asks why Kong is acting this way with his teammates. And he states that they came back to clear the dungeon after a strategic retreat. And when he arrived, it seemed that all the monsters had already been killed. That's all that happened. Dorso asks Khan how he did it. And the protagonist laughs and tells him to stop spitting. Lies. Khan says he knows they came back to get the bloodstones. He says that they are there, and dumping all the stones on the ground, Khan speaks with a very bloodthirsty look. If you want them, just come and get them. And Dorso tells the protagonist that there's some misunderstanding, that he got it all wrong, that they aren't crazy enough to try to kill Mr. Khan, because he knows it was the protagonist who killed all the monsters they couldn't kill. And Dorso finishes his explanation, saying he felt really bad, and couldn't even take him a swimsuit with them. And Dorso says he had no other choice, because his life was also at stake, and that they only came there to get the bloodstones. And that, by pure luck, after they returned, the two had already cleared the dungeons. And so, Dorso thanks for the opportunity to recover the barrier's body. Khan, hearing Doche's words, became thoughtful. Because seeing Dorso, so smiling and speaking so kindly, he thinks he might be being a bit insensitive. And that maybe the ambush he felt was just from the monsters, really. The protagonist knows that Alfie changed him drastically. Because there, he had to be on high alert all the time. Because death could come from anywhere. Khan keeps thinking that he's no longer in Alf, but on Earth. Instantly, upon finishing this thought, he hears something in night. The old man, who is a real piece of work, only knows how to act cowardly and treacherously and signals the other group members to attack. And the uncle and aunt with the arrows release their attack, hitting Sunga's shoulder. The protagonist, even with his eyes blazing, is ready to react, because the only chance they had. They wasted the arrow on the wrong guy. And the son of a sweet pool comes smiling to finish off the protagonist, saying that all the awakened are the same, and he looks happy as he finishes off the protagonist. The scene shifts to the exit of a dungeon, where we see Yvonne congratulating her comrades for the good work they did inside the dungeon. Suddenly, the redhead Linda's phone rings, and it's the scaredy cat, saying that he found the person who invaded his dungeon that day, and Yvonne asks for his name, and he says it's Khan. Rujin, the scaredy cat, says it was difficult to find out who he was because his name didn't appear anywhere, but today, he registered as an awakened. And Yvonne is very surprised because she thought he was a registered awakened. And she asks where he is now. And we return to the scene where we see Kong being attacked by Doche. And Doche, with a semi-psychopathic look, stares at the protagonist, and the protagonist is smiling, saying, "This is tense, huh? What a pertinent attack you have there." The protagonist grabs Doche and throws him with all his might against the concrete. Yeah, and that must have hurt quite a bit. And Dorso is no longer smiling, he's spitting ketchup from his mouth. The protagonist, being the king of evil, knew exactly what Dorso was going to do. Khan, pointing his hand at the other extras, asks if this is how the other awakened ones are. He didn't know they would be so shameless like this. But since they became greedy for the bloodstone, he's going to give them a little blood. At that moment, the protagonist starts summoning his skeletons, and from each corpse, a fighter skeleton begins to be summoned. Then, the protagonist says that now it's time for punishment, and he orders his skeletons to annihilate the other extras. It's a dry stab here, a dry stab there, knife in the gut, gut on the knife, chest on the knife, knife in the chest. It's the festival of carnage. After that, the protagonist takes the knife that the Sweet was using and walks calmly towards him. Certainly, some willies will be cut. And Sweet, choking on ketchup, wants to talk to the protagonist. However, he's not in the mood for a chat. The protagonist says, "Talk? What do you mean, talk? Why talk? Of course, you're trying to buy time until your ignition ability recharges." And without further ado, the Tramontina does its part, and Sweet is going to play in the second division. And the scene is beautiful to see. There are lifeless bodies here, ketchup over there, red paint everywhere. So, the protagonist, who really likes money, decides to pick their pockets and says that Sweet is very wretched because he brought a lot of money to the dungeon. Sunga stands there, looking incredulous, not believing that Kong is robbing everyone who is dead, and thinks it's crazy because the protagonist killed someone without even blinking. And the protagonist says there's no hope for people who betray others. Isn't that right, Sunda? The protagonist looks back and asks why Sunga isn't responding to him. Sunga, who had already zoned out, decides to speak. Yes, that's right. Oh, you don't know what platinato means, do you? What a shame. But I'll translate. Sunga was scared to death and agreed with him. Khan states that Sunga almost died because of him. And Sunga asserts that it wasn't Kang's fault. So, the protagonist asks for 2 more big ones for Sunga. And Sunga is paralyzed upon realizing that Khan only asks for money. Khan, getting even closer to Sunga, he says that he saved him twice, and that he'll have to take that into account when calculating the expenses Sunga brought him. Then, Kang asks Sunga to show his shoulder and says he needs to heal it again. The scene shifts to outside the dungeon, where the staff member is surprised by Kang's approach, and the staff member asks the pair, "Huh, just the two of you? Where are the rest of your group?" And Kang says that the rest were killed by monsters, and Sunga just agrees with the lie the protagonist just made up, because he is terrified by how easily the protagonist kills without any remorse. The guild staff member asks how he managed to get all the bloodstones from the dungeon. He says, "Oh yeah, this is because we risked our lives to get all the bloodstones. Because even if we die, we have to try to get all the bloodstones." The guild staff member asks both to sign the reports and says the office will contact him in case he needs help with investigations about the accident in the dungeon. And so, the protagonist leaves deep in thought. And also the leg, because he managed to earn 3 million won in just one day, which amounts to a total of 445,000 reis. This is without adding the 4 million won that Sunga owes him. The protagonist is very happy because going to the dungeon alone is making a lot of money. And Sunga, who caught COVID and keeps forgetting things, thinks he will have to pay the protagonist 40 million won. And he knows he doesn't have that money, so he'll have to take out a loan. Sunga, in his thoughts, considers asking the protagonist to let it go. However, Kang, calling him by name, says that he knows he hates traitors, doesn't he? So, it's good that he never betrays him. Kang says goodbye and mentions that he will wait for Sunga to get in touch with him. Therefore, Sunga is sure that he will have to take out a loan of 40 million to pay the protagonist. This Sunga is really clueless, man. It was only 4 million. Suddenly, Sunga gets even more confused in his thoughts. He starts thinking that now he doesn't just owe 40 million. He owes a total of 400 million won to the protagonist. What kind of joke is this, dude? The scene changes to a cell phone store, where the store owner is yawning because there is no work for him to do at that moment. And besides, he hasn't had any customers today. Upon hearing a very loud crash, the store owner panics. The store owner asks what that is, and seeing the protagonist enter so abruptly, he asks, "Who are you?" The protagonist doesn't respond and grabs him by the collar. The protagonist is very strong and lifts the salesman, who is a bit chubby, without any difficulty, and out of nowhere, the beating session begins. Just slaps to the face. After the first slap, the salesman asks, "What are you doing?" The protagonist, without saying a word, just keeps slapping him. After a very delicate massage, the salesman is left with nothing but scraps. The salesman knows that the person in front of him is very crazy, so he can't do anything to provoke him. After a session of face slapping, the salesman begs the protagonist not to kill him. Kang is questioning himself whether to kill that wretched salesman or not. So, Kang decides to let him go and says, "Hey, little salesman, do you remember me? I hate people who betray me, and the same goes for those who lied to me. Do you remember that cell phone you sold as if it were new and cutting edge?" The salesman is left not understanding what the protagonist is talking about. And in his mind, and looking closely at the protagonist, he thinks he has never seen that person in his life. The protagonist takes out his 1940 cell phone with a cork and asks, "You sold me this, now do you remember?" It was an iPhone 2, which couldn't download or install almost anything. And only after that does the salesman manage to remember something. He remembers that it was easy to fool that bastard Kang, and that he sold a phone that was worth almost nothing. For a fortune. He tricked the protagonist and spoke so convincingly that the protagonist was amazed to see a state-of-the-art phone in his hands. However, it was a phone that had been made 5 years ago. Now that he remembers who the protagonist is, Kang asks him, "So, aren't you going to answer me? Why did you sell this crappy phone to me, as if it were new and cutting edge?" Later, outside the cell phone store, the protagonist is adding a few more contacts with his new phone, which is now indeed state-of-the-art. The protagonist has very few contacts. His mother, Jae Minho, the real Jae Minho, Sunga, and the cursed salesman. As he leaves the store, the protagonist thinks if he were an Alfie, he would have torn all the limbs off that cursed salesman. At that very moment, two suspicious people approach the protagonist from behind. When they call Kang by name, he stops and turns around to see what they want. The group has already grown, surrounds the protagonist, and asks if he is a necromancer. Rank, Beth. The group says they've been watching him for some time and thinks he's not rank F because he completed a dungeon by himself. Therefore, he is sure that Kang is not rank F, because to rank F, he and Sunga wouldn't be able to kill an entire group. Suddenly, Ivone approaches and says that he is a very brave rookie. The protagonist, not knowing who she is, asks, "Who are you? And we are shown Ivone, a beautiful and stunning redhead. Well, this is the new work of the channel. I hope you like it. Go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel. For those who aren't subscribed, if you want part 2, just ask for part 2 in the comments. And remember that Mao is ni. Looking at Yvonne, asks who she is. Yvonne, beautiful as always, with a lovely and enticing smile, apologizes for the late introduction. Yvonne says her name is Lee Yuni, captain of the main team of the Varong Guild. The protagonist, who is used to battle, senses that Yvonne is using a detection skill on him. And the protagonist, at that moment, feels that Yvonne is very strong. The protagonist is straightforward and asks if Yvonne wants something from him. And Yvonne calls the protagonist a rat, saying that Kong had no fear and was going to enter a dungeon of her guild without authorization. And Kong gets very irritated for being called a rat. And he asks Yvonne if she gathered all the people to catch the rat. And provoking Yvonne, Kong says that the Varong Guild has nothing better to do. And he adds, saying that the dungeon he invaded was terrible. He barely finished saying it. And a hand grabs Kong by the face, with great force, and we see a very strong red-haired guy, throwing Kong with all his might against the ground. The hothead tells Kong not to go around saying whatever he wants. He continues by saying that an idiot like Kong can't badmouth his guild like that. Kong gets very angry and calls that guy a scoundrel. And with great force, he removes the hothead's hand from him. Kong stands up and starts to pressure the hothead. And Yvonne, watching the scene, decides to do something, and since the cat is very powerful, she gives a light kick to the protagonist, and Kong goes flying like a ragdoll. That one, he felt. He falls, feeling pain against the asphalt. The redhead decides to show her superiority and prepares an even stronger blow against Kong, and putting a bit more force, Yvonne presses the protagonist's face against the ground. Kong didn't even have time to react because Yvonne is very fast, and Yvonne, standing imposingly over him, says, "Hey, Kong and Rujin, I'll give you some advice. You don't seem like a normal rank F, but you'd better not make yourself known with that insignificant ability of yours, especially if it involves the Varong Guild." And the redhead, after deceiving the protagonist, gives him an ultimatum, saying if he wants to live a long time, he should heed her advice. And Kong lies trembling before the redhead's power. And the redhead, stunning, walks away, leaving Kong humiliated. And there he is, our protagonist, his face bruised. And he is amazed, as he hasn't been trampled like that in ages. And so, the protagonist has 2 entries in his death note, Yvonne, and the Varong Guild. The scene shifts to Jaminho, who is very impressed to hear that Kong was crushed by Yvonne from the Varong Guild, and Kong asks Jaminho if that person is known, and if Jaminho knows anything about her. And Jaminho responds, saying that, how could he not know, she is one of the 10 rank A awakened in the country. That in the country, as well as in the world, the highest rank is rank A. And that the Varong Guild, along with the KH Guild and Hammer, are the 3 guilds that represent the country. And Jaminho continues his explanation, saying that these 3 guilds are very influential in the country, especially in the economy and politics. The Varong Guild is number 1, both in politics and in the economy. Jaminho becomes curious and asks Khan what he did to attract the attention of the Varong Guild. In the first dungeon he did, Khan, who was already in a bad mood, calls Jaminho a bastard and talks to him. What do you mean by what I did? Kong asserts that when he regains his strength, he will be able to take down the entire Varong Guild platoon. Jaminho starts laughing, saying that the protagonist's self-confidence is very high, and the protagonist, who is quite a teaser, calls Jaminho a cuckold. The protagonist knows he is at a disadvantage, even if he levels up, if the fight happens outside the dungeon, because he won't be able to use his full power. That's because he needs a corpse to use his Necromancer power. The protagonist changes the subject and gives Jaminho a gift. Jaminho, calling the protagonist his older brother, is surprised to receive gifts from him, and Kong tells him to stop pretending to be surprised and pulls out a bundle of 5,000 notes and hands it to Jaminho, and says it's for what he borrowed earlier. Jaminho is very surprised and says that's too much and insists that the protagonist only needs to return what he borrowed, and tells Kong that he doesn't need this, since Kong helped him a lot with those guys. And Kong, calling him a rascal, says it's no problem, that he should just take the money. Jaminho, taking the money, becomes very emotional and calls Kong his older brother, and Kong says this is for the money he borrowed and for the accommodations. Jaminho gets all sweaty upon understanding the protagonist's message, because this means that Kong intends to continue staying at his house. Jaminho asks Kong if he didn't find his mother. Kong confirms that he did, but his mother's house is very small. So, Kong says he will rely on Jaminho until he buys a house for himself. And Kong asks why Jaminho is asking that, or if the money he gave isn't enough. And Kong asks if Jaminho needs more money. Jaminho says he doesn't need more money. The issue isn't money. Jaminho, knowing he would get tangled up, quickly changes the subject and asks if Kong changed his phone. Jaminho is surprised because the model the protagonist has now is the latest one. Jaminho asks to see the phone and the protagonist confirms that is the good one. After checking the phone, Jaminho says it's the best color, crazy red. The protagonist is shocked and asks, crazy red? What does that mean? Jaminho explains that this red color is made with bloodstone and it's very expensive. Therefore, Jaminho assumes that Kong made a lot of money. Kong says that he didn't buy that phone, he won it as a prize at an event. It's a unique event. It's where the seller's life is at stake, so he gives everything he has not to die. And of course, Kong only thought this. He didn't tell Jaminho. Jaminho is surprised and thinks Kong is really very skilled. Jaminho starts to fiddle with the protagonist's phone and finds several apps. Tinder, bank. When he gets to the bank app, he's very surprised and asks how much do you have in this checking account? Kong immediately tells Jaminho to give his phone back now. And we see that Kang's balance is 51 million won, which is 187,000 reis. Kong is shocked because he thought he would only have 4 million won. And grabbing his phone, he sees that the idiot Sunga deposited 40 million instead of 4 million. The scene shifts to a cafe, where we see Kong waiting for Sunga. And Sunga asks how Kong has been. Kong states that only a few hours have passed since he said goodbye. So, he doesn't need to keep asking how he is. And Kong, showing his bank balance, tells Sunga to explain himself. Kong asks Sunga if he thinks he's some kind of beggar. Kong said he only needed 4 big ones, and Sunga starts wondering what those 4 big ones are. Sunga remembers that Prota loves money and knows that if he doesn't give money to Prota might do the same as those people he killed. Sunga starts sweating and kneels before Prota in front of everyone, shouting. Sunga begs Prota not to kill Kong, obviously not understanding anything that's happening. And asks Sunga, what's happening to you? And Sunga, still yelling, says that he will definitely pay Prota everything he owes. And, please, give me a little more time. The people around, watching the scene, think that Kong is a loan shark who came to collect a debt. And everyone concludes that Sunga is the person who borrowed the money and can't afford to pay it back. Kong, very curious, orders Sunga to sit immediately if he doesn't want to die. And the little dog sits right away. Sunga apologizes to Prota, saying that he really doesn't have 4 billion to give him. However, if he is given some time, he will definitely be able to gather all that money to pay him. Of course, the protagonist is shocked when he hears 4 billion. And Sunga confirms. Yes, 4 billion. And the protagonist starts to think that there was definitely a misunderstanding because he only wanted 4 million and Kong already sent him 40 million. And now he plans to pay him 4 billion. So, the protagonist has an excellent idea and decides to take advantage of the misunderstanding that just happened. And the sly protagonist asks Kong how long he will have to wait to receive his money. This protagonist tricks, but there's no need to be mad at him. Let's continue the story. The scene shifts to tomorrow, the next day, and we see Kong walking, relaxed in a park. Kong is surprised to realize that Sunga is waiting for him, as promised. And the protagonist, looking at Sunga, says that he is in a very good mood on his first day as a slave. And Sunga, smiling, says that being a slave has its benefits. Kong looks at Sunga with a smile, thinking he must be crazy. Then we are shown what they talked about the previous afternoon, where the protagonist talks to Sunga since now he can't pay the 400 million. What does he intend to do? And Sunga said he intends to pay by working for the protagonist, forming a group with him. Kong finds this very strange, since Sunga will just stay on the side, comfortably watching him kill the creatures. And Sunga responds by saying of course not, that he will also serve as the protagonist's manager for a certain period of time. The hero is confused, asks what he means. Sunga said, it will be like this, he will do everything for the hero, make the dungeon reservations, sell the blood stones, even be his Uber. In short, will he be someone like from the guild support division? Then the protagonist mischievously says, so you're going to be a slave. And Sunga gives the protagonist a forced smile. Kong concludes that Sunga is trying to pay him with his body since he has no money. Internally, Sunga is feeling like crap. However, externally, he smiles and says yes, he will serve him with his body. When I saw this scene, I thought the protagonist was a real SOB. The protagonist agrees. He says Sunga will serve him for a period of 1 year to pay off his debt. But the protagonist isn't an SOB. He says he'll pay Sunga a salary. I've never seen a slave who gets a salary, but Sunga will get one. He's not a slave, he's more like a salaried worker like you and me. And Kong says that Sunga doesn't need to thank him. He should be the one thanking. The scene shifts to Sunga's car already in motion, and the protagonist is there, smiling and thinking he would return the 36 million back to Sunga. However, he ended up getting a slave instead. The hero tells Sunga to do his task properly and 10% of what they earn will be Sunga's. Sunga is so happy he almost cries, and Kong interrupts this moment by asking if Sunga managed to find the dunja he mentioned. Sunga replies that yes, he managed to reserve the rank 3 dungeon, which has the highest number of monsters, to Senamura for exit 3 of Maebong Station. At this station, a massive herd of haki appeared. I would call these haki cockroaches. Do they look like cockroaches mixed with ants? Both are left speechless by the number of cockroaches in that place. The cockroaches don't attack, only if you attack one of them. So, the protagonist knows that after he kills the first one, things will start to go wrong. And he asks Suma to stay behind him. Kong opens his status window and allocates all his status points into domination. And so, he increases the number of summons he can make by doing this. Kong can now summon 19 skeletons and, smiling, the protagonist exclaims that he will fight quantity with quantity. The protagonist must have pulled about 20 dead rats out of his pocket to summon 19 skeletons out of nowhere. And so, the farming of his loot. The protagonist starts, going through all the floors of the station and exterminating all the creatures. And we see the last mutant cockroach awaiting its tragic end. The last cockroach is trembling with fear, and the skeletons, with bloodlust in their eyes, approach to deliver the final blow, and it takes 3 dry hits at the same time. At that moment, Sunga comes down smiling, saying he just took all the stones from the dead creatures on the upper floor. The protagonist says he did a good job. Keep it up. Now he has to take the stones from the creatures on this floor too. Sunga is amazed because Kong had already cleared the entire floor. Sunga knows that clearing the mutant cockroaches usually takes about 2 hours. And he did it in less than 15 minutes. Alone. He had spent a lot of mana, so he decides to take a break and sit. He takes the chance to view his status window as he had reached level 7, earning many achievement points. The protagonist starts looking at the skills available to him and sees that from level 7, there are many skills. However, all of them are useless. Suddenly, the protagonist finds something that catches his attention and finally discovers a good summon for him, a skeleton mage. However, there's a level restriction on this skill, and he can only use it at level 10. But, since he has money, he's going to buy it right away, for when he reaches level 10. He already has this skill. Sunga approaches, saying that he removed all the blood stones from the creatures on this floor, and asks if the return stone has appeared. The protagonist doesn't answer his question and asks how long they've been inside the dungeon, and Sunga replies that they've been there for 27 minutes. The protagonist, placing his hand on his chin, starts to think and tells Sunga that they rented that dungeon for 4 hours, so they will clear it again. The scene shifts to the place where bloodstones are sold, and the attendant deposits 53 million won into Sunga's account. And Sunga thanks him, equivalent to 19,000 reis. Then Sunga is there, standing, looking and thinking, 53 million. Suddenly, Sunga realizes that 53 million were deposited into his account, and he is so shocked that he almost faints. He is perplexed because he earned 53 million in 30 minutes, and he quickly calculates that, at this rate, he will be able to pay the 400 million to the protagonist quickly. 10% went to him, the rest went to the prota, and you saw the amount of money the protagonist earned in one day. Sunga doesn't understand because he made money, a lot of money. He reveals that, in 1 year, he managed to save 30 million by doing various dungeons. And now, in just half an hour, he earned 53 million. I had warned you that the protagonist isn't that SOB we thought, right? Sunga, looking at his bank account, thinks it's absurd. Sunga is a visionary because he knew it would be great to serve the prota. And now he's much happier because he can make money like he never dreamed. The protagonist, very smiling, tells Sunga to stop exaggerating because they still have to clear that dungeon 7 times, so he can pay off the debt he owes. Therefore, the protagonist tells Sunga not to lose focus. Sunga can't hide the joy he feels and thinks that becoming the prota's manager was the smartest thing he ever did in his life. The scene shifts to the headquarters of the Hammer Guild, and we see someone alone, working late, in the office, still working. And the person is there, happy, listening to music, working a little, grinding coffee. Because he knows it's very chic to grind your own coffee. Then, his phone rings. He answers, "Hello, this is the leader of Group 4, June Michel, whom we will call Michel." And the person on the other end is Jamin. Let me think of a name for him, because Jamin still says no. Rail, his name will be Rail. And Michel asks, "What's the problem?" And we see Rail on the phone, saying he has something urgent to report. And Rail informs that 2 people have reserved the doubt for 4 hours. And he informs that the people who reserved are very serious. And Michel says that people die in dungeons all the time. And Rail says, no, that's not what I want to talk to you about. Rail informs that the people cleared the dungeon perfectly, but their clearing is abnormal. He says they cleared the dungeon the first time in 30 minutes. And, the second time, they took 11 minutes. And now, the third time, they took only 9 minutes and 47 seconds to complete a dungeon. Suddenly, Michel hears shouting in the office where Rail is. And someone says, "I won, pay up right now." The 3 employees of the Hammer Guild, who were in that office watching the protagonist, were betting on how long it would take the protagonist to clear that dungeon, and the winner said he would clear it in less than 10 minutes. After this commotion, Rail talks to his leader. If it wouldn't be a good idea to investigate their lives. When Rail says they are rank F, Michelle is shocked and says rank F. Immediately, he turns on the computer and starts researching the protagonist's life. Michelle can't believe it and begins to question what's going on, and he realizes that the protagonist only registered yesterday, and Sunga registered 2 months ago, and he is even more surprised when he sees that they are clearing a level 3 dungeon, and they've only been awakened for a short time. Rank F? Of course, they are not rank F. Evaluation wrong, and it was way off. Michelle concludes they are rank C. Michelle doesn't know it's only the protagonist clearing it. Michelle knows rank C individuals will grow a lot and become a very high rank. And with all this excitement, Michelle quickly sets off to try to recruit the duo. And again, the scene shifts to the headquarters of the Varong Guild, and we have an image of the protagonist coming out of yet another dungeon clearing. The person observing states that that is the person who invaded their guild. And they ask who the person next to the protagonist in the footage is. The employee says it's Sunga, 21 years old. However, Sunga is just an F-rank mage who uses fireballs and doesn't know how to sing a little song to deal more damage. Then, the person sitting says that, for sure, Kong is the main force of this group, and they observe Kong, an F-rank necromancer who can clear a rank 3 dungeon with incredible speed. The person sitting asks Yvonne what she thought of the protagonist. And Yvonne states that she thought he wasn't a normal F-rank, but not to this level. And Yvonne adds, saying that for sure, Kong is rank C. In this scene, Yvonne looked really stunning, right? The thinker, who is in the room, concludes that 2 things might have happened. The first is that Kong has been deliberately hiding his rank during the evaluation. And the second is that he might be evolving at an incredible speed, and Yvonne asks if he has ever seen such a significant evolution in his life. Even if he is an F-rank awakener, he basically went up 2 or 3 ranks in one night, and the person says that there was a similar case in the past. There was an awakener who evolved from rank F to rank A in a very absurd way, too. And he says that it's Yvonne with this person, as he is the #1 awakener in Korea. And the name of this person is Kim Kong-soo. And Yvonne smiling says it's amazing, but he cannot be compared to Kim Kong-chul. And the person who is very intelligent says who knows, it doesn't hurt to take a look, it won't hurt at all. Finally, we are shown the person's face. He orders to track the Prota, as he will personally go to convince Kong. And finally, we are shown his name, Master Lee Sunga, owner of the Varong Guild, whom we will call Sunga. The scene shifts to the Prota, breaking the 4th wall, and asking us who are watching the video if we are tired. We are not, but Sunga is quite tired and drinking a lot of water. And the Prota asks Sunga, how much time is left? Sunga says about 12 minutes still. Kong is thinking that there are 4 million won from Lu, but I think they made a mistake with this image, because it should be 4 billion won, not 4 million. Because Sunga, who is Sunga if you look at the notebook there, on the side, he has 373 million won. And the Prota has 9 times that amount. So, Kong thinks it's already enough for him to buy a house for Soa and his mother. The Prota stands up and calls Sunga. The Prota informs Sunga that, from now on, all the bloodstones he digs up will be his, and the Prota also informs that he will still mark the bloodstones to be more effective in digging them up. Sunga is confused and the Prota explains in more detail. Kong says that from now on, all the bloodstones will belong to Sunga. Everything he digs up is for him. The Prota takes a deep breath and says, shall we pick up the pace? And he takes off at full speed as he intends to break the record and clear that mine. Sunga can't believe it and calls for his older brother. If you look closely, the Prota still has that famous crowbar he found in that first dungeon, and he speeds through, slicing countless cockroaches. Then, Sunga decides to give us a lesson on how to extract bloodstones. First, stab the cockroach accurately in the back of the neck. Then, with both hands, separate the head from the body. After that, just extract the bloodstone. And that's it. Sunga is completely worn out and thinks, even though money is important, he believes there's a chance he might die if he continues like that. Digging, 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 until his strength is completely gone. He still thinks that he's never heard of anyone dying from digging for bloodstones. There are still many cockroaches on the ground, but Sunga asks for a break. He asks Kong if they can rest for a bit. Kong says yes and opens his status window. Suddenly, a curious cockroach appears on the protagonist's back. The protagonist is there, looking at his status window, and that curious cockroach remains on his back, like that nosy neighbor. Kong was already fed up with the nosy neighbor and decides to slice the little bug. After killing this last cockroach, a system notification appears saying that Kong is at level 10. Now he can choose which class he wants to be. Kong looks and is unsure, finding it very strange because the Necromancer class doesn't appear for him to choose. And when he went to ALF, there was also a class choice when reaching level 10. The protagonist takes a while to choose which class he wants to be. Suddenly, several notification windows appear for the protagonist. The system starts analyzing which would be the best class for the protagonist. This selection is automatic, and the system chooses the warrior class for the protagonist. Thus, the system grants the privilege of the warrior class and gives a weapon to the protagonist. Kong is shocked and thinks it's very inconvenient because he is a necromancer. How could the system choose the warrior class for him? Definitely, the system should have chosen a mage class, as mage would be better to combine with his necromancer class. The protagonist now has 2 classes. Because he kept slicing up the creatures with a crowbar and fighting hand-to-hand all the time, the system understood that the best class for him would be warrior. A metal bar appears in front of the protagonist as his reward for the warrior class. When the protagonist grabs the metal bar, he feels a great strength and connection. The protagonist sees it as a metal staff, but it is overpowered. As he evolves, it does too. He doesn't need to carry it, it stays in a special place. He just needs to summon it, and it will appear in his hand. And if he dismisses it, it returns to the dimension where it is stored. Now, the protagonist is all joy, because he has a weapon that will evolve along with him, and Kong is very eager to see what it will become after this. Since the protagonist has 2 classes, he gains 2 privileges. The first was the warrior, and now it's the necromancer. Every 10 levels, he gets 1 privilege per class. There are 7 sealed demon stones. And every 10 levels, the protagonist will receive a sealed demon stone. These sealed demons are much stronger than the skeletons the protagonist summons. In these figures I show, only 6 sealed demons appear. The 7th one, it's impossible to know which. Actually, possible. The story is all mixed up in this chapter. I'm struggling to put it in order for you. Now I found the 7th demon. The protagonist becomes very curious because he doesn't know which demon will come out of the seal. And so, he orders the seal to release. A strong magic begins to emerge. Then, we see demon wings, beautiful eyes, and a perfect mouth. And the hero is shocked. He says, is it you? And we see Bibi, a very beautiful little demon. Bibi has tears in her eyes and asks, Master, is that you? Where did you go? Bibi says she missed Kong a lot and jumps into his arms. Kong asks Bibi what happened, as he thought she had stayed in Elf. Bibi explains that after the master disappeared, all the summons were trapped inside the seal room. And Kong becomes very thoughtful, as he thinks his summons came to this dimension along with him. Bibi was still hanging around her master's neck when suddenly she smells something very strange. And the smell is getting stronger and stronger. Since Bibi is a little demon, her senses are very sharp, and she recognizes the smell and says, What is this smell, master? Are you feeling it? Kong said he wasn't smelling anything, and Bibi explains that she is sensing in these insects the smell of Tranet's offspring. The protagonist is shocked to hear the name Tranet, and it is explained to us that Tranet is a demon that came from an unknown dimension. And he managed to destroy 90% of the planet Elfin. And Kong, even though he didn't fight Tranet personally, he fought against countless offspring of Tranet that came to his territory, Ardap. His territory was like a country. Unfortunately, the protagonist concludes that Tranet also wants to invade Earth. In other words, Tranet has already begun his invasion of Earth. Thus, Kong is sure that the reason dungeons are appearing is all due to Tranet's influence. The scene changes, and we see Rao telling Michelle that those guys inside the dungeon managed to earn 400 million wands just today. And Rao, who is not awakened, said that if he were that strong, he would also raid a dungeon. Suddenly, Kong and Sunga exit the dungeon and are approached by Michelle, who thanks them for helping him get to the dungeon. Michelle asks if he can take a bit of their time. With a cheeky grin on his face, he says it will be quick. The protagonist ignores him and says he doesn't have time and walks straight past. Michelle stands from a distance, pleading, asking them to wait. The protagonist stops and asks what it is and talks to Michelle. Why? He asked if he could interrupt, since he was going to interrupt anyway. And Michelle, a good salesman, smiles, but inside he's thinking, crazy. Michelle tells the protagonist he said a lot of unnecessary things. Michelle prepares to recruit the protagonist into his guild. Michelle knew he had to be direct. He hands over the Rami guild card. He wants to recruit them both. Kong simply says no, I'm not interested. Bai turns his back and leaves. Michelle, in turn, becomes desperate and tells them to wait, as he doesn't know the Rami Guild. He doesn't know that it's one of the largest guilds in the world. The protagonist says he knows and is aware that the Hammer Guild is one of the top 3 guilds in Korea. Michelle is very happy that the protagonist already knows the Hammer Guild. And so, once again, he tries to hand the guild card to the protagonist. And he informs Kong that they treat talented people in his guild very well. And he also says that if they join the guild, they will provide the best means for them to level up faster. The protagonist looks straight at Michelle and says, "Look here, I'm feeling good." "Damn, now, can you leave me alone?" The protagonist thought he had escaped hell by leaving that planet behind. But it seems that on Earth, there's another hell too. The scene shifts to a new day, and we see the protagonist's mother, very surprised, asking, "What is this?" And we see a salesman presenting the house and saying that they can take as much time as they want and look at everything in the house. Kong is buying a very beautiful house for his mother, and the little one is very happy because there's a garden in the front. Kang's mother asks how they are going to live in this house since he doesn't have the money to buy it. And he says, "Who said?" and shows his cell phone, with a very fat bank account. She is very surprised and asks where he got all that money. Kong, with a smile on his face, tells his mother that he is awakened. She is surprised and says, "Awakened? Did you earn this money in a dungeon? That's a mother for you." She didn't care about the money. The first thing she said is, "That's very dangerous. When did you start this?" Kang's mother says that his father died in a dungeon, so she can't let him enter a dungeon. That's it. And our Manhwa is over.
Dead. It's over.
Because his mother forbade it, it's forbidden. The protagonist stays there trying to convince his mother, saying that he's not that weak. He says that the dungeon creatures are like ants, crushed by him. The mother, Super Mom, says, "Even so, you can't." Fortunately, the sound appeared, "Mom, the house has a garden, so you'll have to keep your promise. Now I want a dog." So, the mother agrees and says it's all right. Hero. "Mom, don't worry, everything will be fine. I'm really strong. I'll make it up to you, Mom. All the work you've done from now on, just believe in me." And so, the hero's mother agrees. Is that okay? The scene changed. We see the protagonist summoning Bibi, commanding her to appear. Bibi tries hard to appear, but poof, she disappears. The protagonist orders again, "Bibi, come out now," and she tries to come out, with even more effort. And Bibi's spirit runs off somewhere, and the protagonist just watches. The protagonist doesn't understand what's happening, as Bibi's behavior is very strange. Suddenly, cute and fluffy paws are seen, and Khan, looking at that cute kitten, asks, "Is that you, Bibi?" The protagonist, looking at that kitten, asks Bibi why she turned into a cat. Bibi states that she can't appear in her original form. That's why she had to use the body of a small mammal. Kong keeps thinking and believes that she can only appear in her original form inside a dungeon, but he still doesn't know why. Kong asks if she is sensing the energy of Trident. Bibi speaks, and says she isn't feeling anything at all. Bibi says the only thing she is sensing is a smell of peace, a very nice smell. Kong keeps thinking about how the demon likes the smell of peace and wonders if the power of Trident hasn't yet reached Earth's reality. The protagonist is there taking care of Bibi when suddenly a person appears behind him and asks if he takes care of stray cats. The protagonist quickly looks to see who is approaching him, and the person introduces themselves. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I am the leader of the Varon Guild. Red Blood. But you can call me Sangu." And Sangu asks the protagonist if they can talk for a bit. Everyone wants to talk to the protagonist. Sunga sits blankly, waiting for the conversation to end. Sunga can't understand the protagonist, and scene shifts to inside Sunga's car. He asks Kong why he refused the guild's offer. The protagonist says he refused as he doesn't want to. He simply doesn't want to. Kong said he hates taking orders from other people. That's why he refused the offer. And Sunga said that now it makes sense. Now he understands. Sunga said that neither the World Hammer Guild nor the Varon Guild mean anything to him. The protagonist is really awesome, since he refused the Hammer Guild's offer for such a reason. Sunga is very happy, because he already has more than 1 million in his account, and soon he will find the cute girl of his dreams. Is there any writing there? Cute that he is in Sunga. He earns 500,000 reis per week. Sunga makes his life plan. From now on, he will follow the protagonist wherever he goes. A salesman arrives to Mr. Swim Trunks, and shows a contract for Sunga to sign. And he says, "Of course, I want to buy now. I have the money to pay in cash." It moves to between the protagonist and Varong. Sam says sorry to the protagonist for what happened yesterday. He says he heard there was a conflict between him and Yvonne, and the protagonist says Yvonne, of course, he forgot about the truck that ran him over. Yvonne's delight ran him over with full force, and stomped on his face with full force, and I proposed to her a strong woman like that will be my wife. Sam says that Yvonne is his younger sister, and she has a somewhat strong temperament. She's a bit fiery. He says that Yvonne cares a lot about the guild, and, since he entered his doubt without warning, she went a bit overboard with him. Sam wants to make up with the protagonist. The protagonist, still feeling the heat, says it's unnecessary. Being straightforward, he gets to the point. He asks what the real reason for this meeting is. He smiles awkwardly and says he understands what he wants. Sam says they've been watching him for a day and that he's raiding at an incredible speed. And this caught the attention of his guild. And based on the speed he raided today, he's definitely at least a rank C. So, Sam is sure that the protagonist will become a high rank soon, and the protagonist quickly understood, because after the Hammer Guild, now comes the Varon Guild trying to recruit him. And so the protagonist says, "So you're trying to recruit me?" And Sam says that's right, please join the Varon Guild. And he promises that Kong will have the best treatment for his level, that he will have the best positions and will receive appropriate treatment for his abilities. The protagonist, hearing that, says, "The best treatment for my abilities?" Then, the protagonist, who doesn't like taking orders from anyone, asks, "So, if I beat you in a duel, will you give me your leadership position?" And Sam starts to laugh and says that the protagonist is very confident. As the rumors say, Sam says that it won't work because he doesn't lead the guild based on strength, since he is just an awakened. Rank B. If it were based on strength, it would definitely be his sister, because she is an awakened ranked. Therefore, even if you beat me, I couldn't pass my leadership to you. The protagonist stands up and begins to leave the place, saying that, in any case, he is not interested in belonging to a guild. Sam asks a very intriguing question to the protagonist. He asks if he happens to know the reasons why the dungeons are appearing. Sam says that it's been 5 years since the dungeons appeared, and in those 5 years, no one on Earth has discovered anything. However, something is happening with the dungeon. Every day, stronger dungeons are emerging, and the monsters are getting stronger. However, humanity is obsessed with bloodstones and only thinks about doing business with the bloodstones, instead of keeping an eye on the dungeons. And Sam concludes by saying that if this continues, surely, not only Korea but the entire world could be annihilated by the dungeons. And he says that he is gathering awakened ones to prevent this from happening. And Sam says that my destiny is to protect the world against the dungeons. And he asks for the 3rd time, please, for the proto to help him. With that, the scene shifts to the Hammer Guild and we see someone working on a computer. We find out that it's Raoul who is observing something. He realizes that the day has become tense, that where he and Michelle are is very tense, because they couldn't recruit the proto. Sam is doing his homework, snooping into the proto's life and is very astonished by what he saw. And he tells Michelle that they just made a reservation for Station 6. Michelle is very pissed off, says he wants nothing to do with that damn brute and asks why Raoul is talking about him so early. Michelle says, so what if he's strong? Is he just a ranker? And Raoul speaks. Boss, this was a 4-star dungeon. Michelle almost chokes on his coffee and immediately comes flying over. Where Hal is? And asks, are they going with just 2 people into a 4-star dungeon? And Hal says, yes, that's right, just with 2 people. And Michelle says those guys are really crazy. Michelle keeps looking and thinks, don't they know that rank F can't enter a rank 4 dungeon? They can only enter these dungeons with minors or support staff. Since they don't know any basics, they certainly aren't people hiding their rank. Yes, they are novices. Looking at the photo of the duo, Michelle wonders what kind of abilities they have. To risk a 4-star dungeon, Michelle starts thinking of a strategy and talks to Sunga. We have a 4-star dungeon in that region, don't we? Sunga confirms that yes, but it's just nearby. Michelle orders Sunga to clear the schedule for that dungeon. He wants it free all day. Hal, confused, asks Michelle, didn't you say we were going to give up on those 2? Michelle, with a smirk on his face, says of course not, we're going all out against them. Learn from me, rookie. If you want to catch a big fish, you have to use a very big bait. The scene shifts to a very beautiful BMW. It's the car that our friend Sunga bought. And the protagonist thinks that car is very smooth and very beautiful. Sunga says he was feeling bad because his old car was very small and a bit uncomfortable. Kong showed that he knows about cars and asks, is this car that, I don't know, the one with the goods? The protagonist is all giddy, looking at the car's dashboard. And Sunga is just thinking, is my boss crazy or did he live in a cave? Because he doesn't even know what a BMW is. And so, Sunga says he will do his best to drive for the protagonist. The protagonist says they're going to go all out and that they're going to work a lot today. The scene shifts to Station 3. And the guild at the station is talking to Sunga, saying it's impossible. 2 rank F people doing a level 4 dungeon, that's forbidden. And Sunga says it's alright because they take responsibility. And the guard says it's not a matter of responsibility, but rather that he can't, it's forbidden. Sunga started playing hard, began to beg. And the dungeon guild says, if you want to kill yourselves, jump in the river, and anyway, you can't enter. You know that joke about N? Sunga says, no, he says, that's it, and who loves you, not O2. Sunga walks towards Kong, all downcast, and says he couldn't convince the guard that unfortunately, they couldn't enter that dungeon. And he apologizes because he should have looked into it better. Kong says, since there's no other way, call the association and reschedule. For tomorrow, in another level 3 dungeon, suddenly, a person appears near Kong and says, my god, what a coincidence to see you here again. It must be fate. Sorry to butt in again, but, is something wrong with you? You seem like you're satisfied. I would love to help you. And Michelle keeps smiling and asks if agreeing is clear. Kong is blunt and direct, saying fate? Fate, nothing, for sure. They already knew something. And Kong pretends to take the bait and says, how do you intend to help us? The scene shifts to the terminal of Station 11, and Michelle asks the duo if they didn't know that 4-star dungeons are restricted to rank C groups. Or so, just a side note. When I say 4-star dungeon, level 4 or rank 4, it's the same thing, back to the story. Michel says that this level 4 dungeon belongs to their guild, and he mentions that he cancelled all the bookings, so they can use that dungeon as much as they want. The protagonist, very cynically, says that he is being very kind and that nothing is free in this world, and Michel, even more cynically, says no, this is just a sign of goodwill, and that he will also handle their rank, raising it to level C, so they can feel at ease in this dungeon. The protagonist, very cynical, says that since he said that, then I will be grateful. Michel starts to flatter the protagonist and says that he has a refreshing personality. Michel tells them to wait a little before entering, as he has prepared some gifts for them. He goes to the car, and in the trunk are all the gifts he intends to give them. Michel starts thinking out loud and says that, of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch. He intends to leave Kong with a huge debt of gratitude. He knows that even though Kong is an awakened ranker, he is still a 24-year-old boy. Michel doesn't know that the protagonist has already lived 44 years. Raoul, smiling, says that the protagonist looks different from yesterday. Kong asks how. Raoul says he was very scared when talking to him yesterday. And the protagonist says that yesterday he was in a bad mood, but today he is better. And he remembers why he was in a bad mood, because Bibi told him that Trident is also trying to invade Earth. 2. Raoul asks the protagonist, since you're in a good mood, how about we go out for a drink? And Kong thinks it's a great idea. Raoul shows that he is full of mischief, wanting the protagonist to sign that contract with the guild no matter what. He plans to get the protagonist drunk and then make him sign a very disadvantageous contract for him. Sangha, from a distance, was watching that conversation where Hal is setting up a place for them to meet with the protagonist so they can go out for drinks afterward. Sangha knows these guys are wasting their time because he knows, no matter how much they kiss up to the protagonist, he doesn't want anyone bossing him around, and that's why he definitely won't join any guild. Michel walks hurriedly in the direction where the protagonist was and is very surprised. Upon realizing that the protagonist is no longer there, he asks Hal where they went, and Hal informs him that they have already entered the dungeon. Michel starts to tremble and asks why they went in. Didn't I say I was going to bring a gift? And Hal says, why don't you give them the gift after they clear the dungeon? Can't you give them the gift after they come out? Michel throws the gifts on the ground, and the mouth opens. And Hal sees what's inside and says, is this it? It's a basic survival kit for a level 4 or higher portal. Michel asks Hal how much he thinks 2 rank F awakened individuals know about a rank 4 portal. The recommended rank to enter a 4-star dungeon is a group formed by several rank D awakened individuals, and having the leader with rank C. Michel knows that Kong outwardly is a rank F, but given the speed at which he clears Tier 3 maneuvers, he will certainly be able to kill the monsters in this dungeon. But the organization of high-level dungeons, which range from Tier 4 to Tier 6, are very different from low-level dungeons. If they enter without information and without basic survival equipment, they will certainly die. And he is sure of this, because any awakened individual would be unable to come out alive from a Tier 4 dungeon or higher. After that, Michel becomes desperate, and realizes he messed up by letting them enter the dungeon. He feels that this is not a demonstration of goodwill, but rather, he is practically sending them to their grave. Earlier, the scene shifts to inside the dungeon, where the protagonist is very confused. He asks Sangha if this is really a level 4 dungeon, because the monsters here are very common, and Sangha doesn't know how to respond. He says he's not sure and thinks that maybe there are easier level 4 dungeons and others that are more difficult. The protagonist and Sangha start looking for the return stone, and they find nothing, just the bodies of the monsters they killed. The giant mutant rats. And Sangha is very scared that there is no return stone there. Kong thinks he didn't find the return stone because his search skills are very low. Yet. So, Kong and Sangha return to the beginning of the dungeon to see if they can find the return stone. With a lot of peace and tranquility, they walk through the corridors. And Kong keeps thinking about why there is no return stone in that place. Sangha informs that the entrance to the dungeon is just ahead, and he is very surprised and even speechless. Next, looking at the portal in front of them, he has an idea why the return stone hasn't appeared yet. The dungeon isn't over. Sangha asks if they should enter there, and the protagonist states that there's no other way. They will have to enter. The protagonist starts to smile and says, that's why it seemed easy, because the real fun is about to begin. And the two, without any fear, enter the portal. Kong is the first to go through, and Sangha follows right behind. They realize they have been teleported to another dimension, where there is a very beautiful forest, many trees. Sangha, very embarrassed, calls for the protagonist, and Kong asks why Sangha is naked. He asks why Sangha took off his clothes. Kong thinks his eyes are going to rot after seeing that image. Sangha, crying and embarrassed, says that the protagonist is also naked. And quickly, the protagonist knows what happened. He says that only their bodies were teleported. The clothes were left behind. Naked, in a tropical forest. Everything is set. I didn't like the scene. It could have been 2 women, naked. But 2 men aren't funny. And in this ridiculous scene, the protagonist calls it the true entrance to the dungeon. It could have a busty alpha. 2 busty elves. I'm going to add a busty elf to counter this image. This elf has nothing to do with the story. The hero is bold and opens his window and pulls out various clothes from it. Sunga is very surprised and asks, how many skills does he have? Previously, Sunga had asked how the protagonist knows how to manipulate dimensional space, and Kong doesn't even look at that grotesque scene and orders the clothes to be invested. First, the last time someone was looking over the protagonist's shoulder when he was messing with his status window, the person died. The neighboring cockroach died. Stop eyeing other people's things, Kong. He keeps thinking that currently he is at level 10, and thanks to the attribute from his past life, his attributes as a level 10 are very high, but he knows he has to progress carefully, as he is now in a level 4 dungeon. Because he cleared the other dungeons using only his necromancy. But now, in a tier 4 dungeon, he knows things are going to get tough. Therefore, he starts allocating points to warrior skills that he never used and learned many warrior skills, as you are reading. So, the protagonist decides to use his warrior class skills. Suddenly, a loud noise is heard, and something starts approaching at high speed towards the protagonist. The trees are in disarray, the ground starts to shake, and something approaches at high speed. Sunga is very scared and knows it's coming in that direction. A very friendly alligator jumps with full force towards the protagonist, and the protagonist grins widely and is ready to test how strong his warrior skill is. Seeing this scene, we can't forget about the crowbar because it didn't pass through the portal. So, F for the crowbar. So, in honor of the crowbar, leave an F for the crowbar in the comments. Are you enjoying my video? You've watched until now and haven't subscribed or hit the like button yet. Please subscribe and hit the like, okay? If not, F for you too. And you'll have nightmares about a naked Sunga instead of busty elves. And now, for those not subscribed, we return to our story. The protagonist sprints towards the alligator and, using the jumping ability, he leaps very high onto the alligator. The protagonist starts to feel a significant difference using the warrior senses, and thus, he will compare his warrior strength with a level 31 monster. And he prepares a strike with all his strength, using his stolen metal staff. The scene shifts to Station 11, where Michel and Raoul realize that the barrier still hasn't disappeared, even after half an hour has passed. He knows that inside the dungeon, time passes 4 times faster, so 2 hours have already passed in there. Ralph is surprised and wonders how long the protagonist will last in there, and he asks Michel if Kong wouldn't be able to kill the crocodiles. And Michel says, with his bare hands, it's quite difficult. That's why I wanted to give him the survival kit, because the weapons in this kit are made with weapons from another world. They don't disappear when they pass through the portal. The portal doesn't allow anything from this world through it, only people's bodies. And Michel, still desperate, he says that even if they manage to defeat 1 or 2 monsters, the most annoying thing to get is food and water. He says it's very difficult to survive in the jungle without any supplies. Raoul and Michel keep trying to imagine and realize that it's just problem after problem. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, the protagonist is having a crocodile barbecue, because he gets food by killing the creatures, and he has a huge inventory, full of many things. So, boiling water, filtering water, containers, the protagonist has all of that in his dimensional space. And Suga, who had never eaten crocodile meat, finds it delicious. The protagonist is smarter. He's already eaten it and offers a beer to Suga, and says that beer with crocodile meat is very tasty. Anyone who has had beer with crocodile meat, let us know if it's tasty or not. I think it is, because alligator meat is really tasty. Sunga is already drunk and says it's great. Contrary to what Michel and Raoul think, the protagonist is having a lot of fun in that dungeon. Raoul states that a lot of time has already passed. So, he thinks they could survive in there. Michel, who is known for talking nonsense, only opens his mouth to speak nonsense, says it will be very difficult for them to move around in the swamps. And Hal is surprised and asks, are there swamps? Michel says yes, that in this place it's hard to walk. And, occasionally, the worst creatures appear to fight them. Michel informs that while they are stuck, monkeys will appear. Monkeys, crocs, and anacondas. So, the duo will have to fight monkeys in the trees and anacondas underwater. Then, according to Michel, they don't stand a chance. And Hal exclaims, wow, do the monkeys attack from the trees? Of the two, the only long-distance attacker is Sunga, because he has the fireball. And we see the scene of many monkeys in the trees, ready to attack the duo. And in this scene, we see Boca Santa saying that Sunga's fireballs won't be enough because he doesn't know the little song. Those of you who are curious about the little song haven't seen my latest videos. The little song goes like this. Fireball that kills everyone, pow, boom, bye. As I, the wise man, say, the effect of your fireball increases by 10,000%. Michel, after talking about the monkeys, says this is going to be very tough, it will be almost impossible for them to get through. And we see dozens of fireballs going at the same time towards the monkeys. And then it's monkey roasted, monkey toasted, monkey fried, monkey baked, monkey boiled. The protagonist is there walking. Burn them all. And it's not the guy in the Speedo who's burning. The guy in the Speedo is there, shocked. Have you always had these powers? How have I never seen them before? And we are shown the protagonist, in front of his skeleton mages. You remember he was at level 6 and bought the mages which he can only use at level 10, right? The holy mouth isn't jinxing anything now. He's eating instant noodles and didn't offer anyone. And Hal remembers that 4 hours have already passed. So, inside the dungeon, 16 hours have already passed. And Hal asks the holy mouth if he doesn't think the protagonist will be able to complete the dungeon. And the holy mouth says that, in high-rank dungeons, the monsters aren't the biggest problem. Holy mouth, in this place, the plants, the insects, the animals, anything can kill you. The holy mouth asks Hal how much he thinks that the duo knows about the wildlife of that place, and Hal despairs upon learning that there are many poisonous things in that world. So, if they eat them, it's game over for them. Our friend Sunga, who has already been saved 3 times, finds a very delicious fruit and thinks about eating it, and takes a very big bite of the fruit, and asks the protagonist why this fruit is so sweet. And Kong gives him a warning. If you eat this fruit without cooking it, you will die. And immediately, Sunga spits out what he had chewed. And Sunga asks Kong why he didn't warn him earlier. Kong doesn't respond and smiles. Sunga thinks something's wrong. He asks the protagonist why he knows so much about this world. And Kong, in his thoughts, says that of course he knows, because he lived 20 years in this world. This dungeon is exactly like the planet Alf, where he lived for 20 years. Night falls. At the station where Michelle and Hal are. And Hal asks Michelle why he is putting so much faith in Kong, since this Kong doesn't seem to have any interest in the guild. And Boquiña Santa says that in the last 5 years, he has never been wrong. He never makes a mistake when he sees talent. And Hal, very smiling, says he knows many stories about him because he found many talents. For the guild and the famous Park Hun, who is rank A, he was the one who found him too. So, Boquiña Santa says that when he saw Kong, he was sure that he would be the best guy in the guild, even stronger than the rank A that the guild has. So, Boquiña Santa says that even if the protagonist doesn't join the guild, the important thing is that he comes back alive, because he will be a very strong guy in the future, and he knows that the world in Korea will need him. Raul gets very excited and calls Michelle for the 2 of them to pray together. Boquiña Santa says it's going to be very difficult for them to come back alive. Hal changes his expression at once and asks why. Boquiña Santa explains who is guarding that return stone. It's a very strong and very powerful being. And Hal starts thinking. That's why he suggested the 2 of them pray for their safe return. And only now does Hal realize that Michelle is Boquiña Santa. After that, we see the protagonist and Sunga walking towards the return stone. Sunga is surprised because there's no one near the return stone, and it's right there, in front of him. And Sunga, who has had his life saved by the protagonist several times, walks calmly towards the return stone. And Kong immediately pulls him back before he falls into a trap. The ground where he was standing suddenly collapses. And a very deadly trap appears. Sunga is lucky that the protagonist isn't charging him for all the times he saved his life, as this is now the 5th time. Sunga remains inattentive and, staring at the protagonist, he thanks him for saving his life. Kong doesn't even look at Sunga and continues, staring in the direction of the crystal. And the clueless Sunga asks why he's looking in that direction. Sunga gets a huge fright when he sees what's in that direction and asks the protagonist, who are those guys? Orcs. Several ORCS were waiting for the 2 of them. The protagonist says that this is unexpected. He wonders if those aren't ORCS from Ulf, the book of ORCS. It's no joke. In the society of Ulf, there were many races, humans, elves, dwarves, beastmen, and other types, such as ORCS. But what interests the protagonist is what the ORCS from Ulf are doing in a dungeon. How can the protagonist speak their language? He asks what they are doing there. Everyone is astonished, Sunga is astonished, and the orcs are also astonished, and one wonders how that human knows our language. Then, their leader asks who he is and how the human from Earth knows their language. Kong says that it doesn't matter. The most important thing is what they are doing there, and the orc leader says that they lost their home. Kong asks the leader if Trident conquered their land, and the orc leader says that's exactly what happened. The orc leader informs that after a part of the balance of power disappeared, Trident became the master of everything. On that planet, the part of the balance that disappeared is Prota, because his country was the most powerful. The ORC says they are there because of the contract they made with Trident. And Kong asks what contract. Raising his war axe, the ORC says that in this contract, Trident promises to make Earth the new home of the orcs. This even seems like a scene from a movie I've seen. Then, the leader of the ORCS says he will make Earth their new home. Kong, smiling, says that Earth never belonged to Trident. So, their contract is useless. Prota, threatening the orcs, asks how they dare to invade Earth. They will die because of this. And so, the great ORC gives an order for all his ORC warriors to massacre the 2. And immediately, all the ORCS jump on Prota. Prota faces them with a lot of determination. Sunga, at this moment, surely lived up to his nickname and already crapped a solid pound. The scene shifts to station number 11, and Raul and Boca Santa are talking. Raul says that the situation seems bad, as 6 hours and 20 minutes have already passed. Boca Santa says that practically a day has passed inside the dungeon. Suddenly, the protective barrier changes color, meaning they cleared a 4-star dungeon. Even better. With only 2 people. Raoul is astonished to see that the countdown has disappeared because they really managed to clear this dungeon. Boquinha Santa is hoping that they come out of there in one piece. And, looking into the depths of the dungeon, no one appears. He waits for a while and nothing, and time is passing. Raoul believes that this dungeon was too much for the two of them. Boquinha Santa said, "Let's go." Raoul, I think they died. But suddenly he hears a voice. Sanga was complaining. He was saying that they should use a cart to carry all the things they were bringing. Prota and Sanga had taken all of Zor's weapons. And only now does Boquinha Santa congratulate them for returning from a 4-star dungeon. Kong asks why Boquinha Santa is so happy. Kong states that they didn't need a survival kit, however, the hunt was very good. Kong looked at the prices of the things they brought. He sees that crocodile leather is very expensive, so Kong tells Sanga. Next time they return, he will have to skin all the crocodiles. Sanga is thinking that he only keeps digging for bloodstone, but now his boss wants him to also start skinning crocodiles. Thus, Sanga's dream of becoming the flame wizard seems distant. Sees someone familiar passing by, and Sanga asks, "What's the problem?" The protagonist says that Jaminho is passing by nearby, tells Sanga to turn around to talk with Jaminho. Jaminho is walking with a pretty girl. The protagonist calls Jaminho, and he seems suspicious, and sees that it's his older brother, in the imported car. Jaminho's sister looks at who is in the car and says nothing. The protagonist asks if Jaminho is on a date with his girlfriend. Jaminho says, "Ugh, of course not, she's my sister." And Jaminho introduces his older sister to the protagonist and says that he's the one he had told her about before. Suddenly, Jaminho's sister looks closely at the guy and says, "Yeah, is it you, Kong?" And Kong is startled because he also knew Jaminho's sister. The scene shifts to the Hammer Guild headquarters, where Boquinha Santa is suggesting to his boss to give the position of vice president to the protagonist. The guild president asks if it's really worth it. The phone rings and the secretary informs that the ranked awakened is Hammer Guild. Just arrived. Park Jin-ho is surprised by Boquinha Santa's presence. Boquinha Santa knows he is just a mere employee. Then, he decides to leave and let the two of them talk. Jin-ho asks the guild leader, "What's wrong with Boquinha Santa?" The guild leader says he has no idea, but it seems he met a necromancer and is asking me to give the vice president position to him. Park Jin-ho trusts Boquinha Santa's decisions, so they should do everything to bring the necromancer into their guild. The guild president says it's not like that, because lately the people he has recruited are terrible. The guild president says that Boquinha Santa finding Park Jin-ho was a matter of luck. And Park Jin-ho tells the president not to be so hard on Boquinha Santa. After that, the guild leader changes the subject and asks Park Jin-ho how things went in the United States. Park Jin-ho says that the rumors are true and mentions that there is indeed someone new in the Titan Guild. Since the rumors are true, then certainly someone who came out of a dungeon is now in the Titan Guild. There is a woman being observed on the monitor, and two people are talking about her, asking how she is doing. The woman tells the blonde that nothing has changed. She continues speaking in a strange language that they don't know. She keeps repeating unknown words all the time. The same word, it seems like she suffered some trauma. The blonde says that, in any case, she was a key piece for them to understand what the dungeons are. Then, speaking to his assistant, he tells her to heal her by any means, because they need to find out what she knows. Because it's been 5 years since the dungeons appeared and the whole world still knows nothing about them. Yet, the blonde is the leader of the Titan's Guide, Awakened Rank. His name is Jean Kong, but we will call him Destiny. The elf is speaking a language that no one knows and keeps repeating it all the time. Looking at the horizon, we saw that the translation of what she is saying is the name Kong Rujin, which is his own name. If you liked it and want part 3, just ask for part 3 in the comments. The name of the MOA is also there in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much. This is already part 3 of our story. This chapter begins by showing the apartment where Jae Minho lives. Late into the night, he is studying hard and looks at the calendar and sees that the date is already near. His exams will soon be here. So, let's get to studying. Jae Minho is very worried. He keeps thinking that nothing bad will happen and doesn't know what Khan was thinking when he asked his sister out. He remembers that the protagonist invited both of them to have a barbecue, but he declined because he had to study for the exam. Then, we are shown the place where the protagonist is meeting. The protagonist is there, drinking his kachaka and thinks it's really cool that Jinwoo is Jae Minho's sister. Khan says it's been 20 no, he says. It's been 5 years since he last saw her, but she is still beautiful. And I'm not going to call her Jinwoo, no, I'll have to come up with a name for her. She looks like a Layla, so she'll be called Layla, and Layla gets very embarrassed and says she doesn't know what Kong is talking about. Kong thinks she's very humble and starts to smile, and Kong tells Sunga that Layla was the most popular person in school and that half the guys at school had a secret crush on her. Sunga, already full of booze, says that he must have been really cool when he was younger. And Layla says it's nothing like that. And Kong confesses that he was included too. He also had a secret crush on Layla. Khan says she was brilliant, beautiful, and got along well with everyone. And Layla is there, drinking her booze and full of embarrassment, wondering if Khan was always this friendly. And Kong asks why she's wearing a hat, if by any chance she didn't wash her hair. And Layla is startled by what he just said. She says no, she just likes hats, that's why she's wearing one. Sunga watches the scene and realizes something is off. He thinks to himself that he knew Kong was straightforward, but not to this extent. I think the protagonist is already drunk, because he's saying like, it looks uncomfortable, why don't you take it off? And Layla says it's all right, she really likes hats. Sunga wonders how Kong can say that to a lady. You don't talk to a woman like that. Suddenly, Sunga discovers what's going on. He is shocked. He thinks that the mighty Kong has never dated before. He's a virgin, and BV. Oh, what is BV? Oh, almost everyone knows what BV is. BV is virgin mouth. That's it. Nothing like a beautiful lady to turn a strong guy into a fool who doesn't even know what to do. The power of a woman is incredible. Sunga realizes that Kong likes Layla, but he doesn't know how to express his feelings. Layla feels awkward, and Sunga knows that the atmosphere between the two can't stay like that, so he decides to give the couple a little help and invites Kong and Layla to join in a game. They say, a game? And Sunga reaffirms, yes, we have to play while we're drinking. Someone tells Sunga that adults only play after they're drunk, not while they're drinking. And the protagonist, looking at that, says, a game? Just like that, out of nowhere. Now, if the protagonist has poison resistance, he definitely won't get drunk. Get ready, because I'm going to sing. Sunga is singing the song Garkam, here at this bar table, but I'm going to sing another one. Anyone who laughs and thinks my voice is ugly is a fool. Sick with love, I looked for a cure. In the nightlife. Hold on. It was just a joke. I'm not going to sing like that. Okay, no need to change your description. And Sunga started to sing, and sings, and got excited, and started making a bunch of gestures. Yours, and the protagonist is starting to get pee-pee. I seed. The protagonist begins to exude a murderous aura and tells Sunga to sit down before he puts a horn on Unga's head. Sunga shivers with fear and sits down. Immediately, Layla was already very dizzy and fell asleep, and they notice that she passed out completely. Suddenly, Layla's charming hat falls off her head, hitting the floor. Sunga sees that scene and gets scared. It's really a shock, Sunga thinks. He's already drunk in a sea. ING things, and the blonde who just entered is startled by the scar on Layla's forehead. The blonde keeps commenting, did this girl get burned or something like that? Sunga is there, standing drunk and watching, and the protagonist is just listening to their conversation, and the shocked Sunga says, hey Khan, look at her head. Khan stops and starts observing. And look, how beautiful Layla's face is, how beautiful she is. He says, hey Sunga, stop being so shocked and quit making such a fuss. What's the problem with that? Isn't she still beautiful? I think she's still beautiful. Putting the hat back on her head. Khan tells Sunga that they're going for one last drink. The last of the last, of the last, of the last, of the last. The scene shifts to the apartment where Jae Minho lives, and Layla wakes up with a severe headache. She wakes up startled. Huh, what happened? Jae Minho, looking at his older sister, says, hi sister, and Layla is surprised. Ha, I'm at home. How did I get here? How did I come back? Caramba, did you drink that much? Don't you remember? Look, Khan carried you home. Sister, go brush your teeth, I made a hangover soup for you. And Layla went to the school bathroom, and she kept looking at herself in the mirror, wondering if she slept without taking off her hat. Suddenly, memories start coming to her mind. She remembers being at the table with the two of them and was so drunk that she couldn't even open her eyes, and she also remembers that Khan was the one who carried her in his arms all the way home. Her expression changes to sadness, knowing that Khan saw her with that huge scar. The story explains to us that Layla got this scar 5 years ago, when the dungeon shock happened. It is explained that Layla was attacked by a monster. She keeps thinking that she didn't want Khan to see her like that, but then cheats and starts to remember what Khan said. She wasn't sleeping, she was just very drunk, and she remembers him talking to Sue, saying that she is still beautiful. Layla blushes at the memory of this situation, and certainly, she still has a crush on the protagonist. The scene shifts to the school, or rather, to past memories of the school. The teacher asks who is responsible for the clean. ING and Khan, still young, says it's him. After that, the teacher asks who the other person responsible for cleaning is, and a student raises their hand, saying it's her. Khan, upon seeing the beautiful and cute girl, becomes even blushed, and Layla, radiating beauty. Then, the teacher says he will leave the classroom cleaning to the two of them and that they can start cleaning after all the students leave. The protagonist closes the classroom after cleaning, and Layla asks if they aren't forgetting anything. Kang only responds with one word. And Layla, who was expecting a conversation, stands there, not understanding why he talks so little, and she, smiling brightly, says that he is very quiet, that he even seems like her little brother, because both only respond with yes or no. And the protagonist responds again with another monosyllable. And Layla, very cheerful, says that she finally managed to talk to Kang after an entire semester, and that from now on, she wants to talk to him in a less informal way. Layla says there's something she wants to talk about with Kang and tells him to come closer. She says, "It's just that." Put in the comments what you think she whispered in his ear. The scene changes to the kitten Bibi calling for her master, telling him to wake up. Bibi asks if Kang didn't sleep well, and he looks very angry because she woke him up during the best part of his dream. Kang asks Bibi if she cast any spell on him while he was sleeping, because the dream was really good. The scene shifts to the hotel lobby, where Kang and Sunga are staying. Sunga is already working when the protagonist arrives, and he asks if Kang didn't sleep well. He says yes and goes straight to the topic of the dungeon, asking if he meant Ed to make any reservations for a level 4 dungeon. Sunga says she's still looking, but hasn't found any yet because the number of level 4 dungeons is very low. Therefore, the large guilds and the medium guilds reserve these dungeons very quickly. Kang asks, "So what are we going to do? So, if we can't get a level 4 dungeon, then we have to at least get a level 3 one." Kang starts thinking of a strategy and tells Sunga that there's a way, and grabs his phone and decides to call the idiot. Kang starts thinking mischievously, and Sunga looks puzzled, not knowing why Kang is laughing at the phone. The idiot answers and says he'll be there soon. Ka-ing says that 15 minutes is the maximum he can wait. Sunga asks the protagonist who he called, and Kang replies, "Who do you think? Someone who loves to give me things." And he looks very smilingly at the idiot's name on his phone. And Sunga still doesn't understand who this idiot is. 15 minutes later, the door opens and Michelle enters, running and very out of breath. Kang says he arrived very quickly. Michigan, L, sweating profusely, apologizes for making Kang wait so long. Right after, Michelle asks, but Kang needs his help with. And they say that they need to find a tier 4 dungeon to raid. Michelle says that many people use dungeon forums to find dungeons, but that's not very professional. And opening his laptop, he asks them to wait a second while he runs a check. Sunga is very surprised by what he's seeing and asks if this is some exclusive guild program. And Michelle says that many dungeons only appear in these exclusive guild programs. Michelle explains that there is an exclusive guild group just to provide this support, and so he logs into the Hammer Guild program and quickly changes the subject by asking if the protagonist stayed at this hotel last night, and adds that if Sung joins the Hammer Guild, he can stay in any hotel he wants, for as long as he wants, and also says if Sung wants a house, instead of staying in hotels, the Hammer Guild can get a house for them for free. Sunga, looking at Michelle, starts to feel sorry for Michelle, because he knows the protagonist will never join the Hammer Guild, and the cynical as always, keeps smiling and says it seems like a great offer. Still smiling, Michelle says had he managed to find and has already scheduled a 4-star dungeon for them. Sang is very surprised by his speed, and Michelle says he scheduled it for 2 days, and the cynical protagonist says that guilds are indeed very useful. Michelle still hasn't realized that he's being used, and says he's very happy to be able to help the protagonist. And Sunga continues with his look of pity for poor Michelle. The scene shifts to the second subway station, and Raoul also appears in the scene, saying that he managed to confirm the booking. Michelle, all smiles, says that their entry into the dungeon is in a few minutes, so they have some time to chat. So, he invites the protagonist to have a cup of tea. He says that if some wants, he has a lot of information to give about the inside of the dungeon, and the protagonist continues with his cynicism. Whispering to Tsung, Michelle says that the information is of high quality and was gathered by the Hammer Guild. And the cynical protagonist says that this greatly increases the expectations. Suddenly, there's a noise and something catches Sunga's attention. He looks at Station 2, and there's a brill, the very strange coming out of it, and is informed that this is a dungeon reset. Sunga, very surprised, says it's the first time he's seen a reset, and Michelle is even more surprised. Michelle tells Raoul to get in touch immediately with the guild. Meanwhile, several passers-by are registering the dungeon reset. The protagonist asks what a dungeon reset is. After a little more time, several reports have already appeared announcing the dungeon reset, and the military and support services also arrived to see the reset. After the melee arrived, no other civilians were allowed to come near the entrance. The dungeon. And the dungeon was there, emitting its primary energy. When it is reset, Sung just observes, as he knows nothing about this. Reset. Suddenly, Michelle exclaims, "So, the mind has reached the end of its life." And Sung doesn't understand what he just said and asks Michelle to explain it better. Michelle says that dungeons are divided into 3 categories. The first category is the mind, the second category is the reset, and finally, the third category is the breaking of the mind, and he informs that all the onions that the protagonist raided were just mines. After that, Mike Hell explains what mines are. He says that mines are dungeons where the first clear was done. After the first clear, basic monsters will be summoned, and the awakened, who are called miners, enter the mine to collect bloodstones. And Michel continues with his long explanation. He says that mines last about 2 to 3 months, but when the mine reaches its end, it resets and becomes a new dungeon. And so, this mine they are observing has just been reset and turned into a new dungeon. Michel gives other data. ILS saying that many guilds will come here, trying to be the first to clear the dungeon. After that, Michel decides to talk about the breaking of dungeons, but CA Ing asks him to wait. Sound asks Michel if after the dungeon resets, it becomes ownerless. Michel, very smiling, says that's exactly right. He says that whoever arrives first becomes the owner of the dungeon. Michel, who thinks very quickly, is startled and asks if Tsang is thinking about entering that dungeon. The protagonist, with his psychopathic gaze, says yes, that there's no reason not to enter it. Michel panics and says that Tsang Xie, you can enter because the monsters from the first clear are much stronger than the monsters from the mine. And Bokinia Santa claims that only guilds can handle so many monsters. Strong roses and sums up Michel's thinking, and says that the guilds want to monopolize the dungeons. Michel says that's not what he meant. He says that the law allows the awakened to enter the dungeon, but they can only enter after the dungeon's energy is measured. And Sung asks, what energy? What do you mean energy? Michel states that there is a different energy that comes out of the dungeon when it is reset, and so they measure the energy level, and by this measurement, they can classify the dungeon as level 1 to level 6. Michel says that rank C can only enter a rank 4 dungeon, and the awakened of rank B can only be in a rank 5 dungeon. NCO down, and only a group of A rank awakened can enter a dungeon of rank 6. Sang becomes thoughtful and asks, Michel, didn't you say I'm rank C? So I can only enter that dungeon if it's rank 4 or lower, right? Ever to Tsang's misfortune, that dungeon is rank 5, and immediately he becomes very frustrated. Bokinia-san gets all cheerful and says that Tsang will have to give up because he can't enter a rank dungeon 5 dungeon, remembering that it must be trendy to wear those ankle-length pants. Look, everyone has their cleats showing. What ugly pants, man. Moments later, several extras look as they look in one direction. Suddenly, the Red Bird group appears, led by the stunning Yvonne. Every time I see Yvonne, I fall in love. Michelle thinks they arrived too. Quickly, they must have been nearby, and she quickly concludes that this dungeon will definitely belong to the Warang Guild. Sang is already on alert with the redhead who's in his death note and soon recognizes the stunning redhead Yvonne. Sang remembers the humiliation Yvonne made him endure by stepping on his face, and this narrator here is eager for Yvonne to step on me too. Well, let me compose myself and get back to the narration. Sang is the type to hold a grudge, and said he won't let this one slide. Thus begins the Marauder's map. I solemnly swear, I am up to no good. Sang starts his strategy and shouts for everyone to hear that there's now an unhinged Ranka nearby. And Michelle almost has a heart attack hearing Sang provo King Yvonne. Sang asserts that with this unhinged one, there won't be any problem at all in clearing a rank 5 dungeon. Yvonne is surprised by the presence of the rat Sang in that place. Sang maliciously approaches Yvonne, saying that the equipment of a rank A awakened is really cool. And Yvonne, with a big smile on his face, says that this onion is level 5, and it's not a place for someone like Sang. And the delightful redhead commands and to stop being a pest and disappear. Sang, who is only thinking of mischief, starts to smile and tells her not to be so harsh. And getting even closer to Yvonne, he asks to take a look at her equipment, and says that her equipment won't come off if he just takes a quick look. Yvonne is not in the mood for games, and gets very angry, calling Sang a scoundrel and asking where he the nerve to be touching. Sungahul, who had gone to get snacks, are already getting along well with each other and bring snacks for everyone. Sunga asks Hal if he knows anything about that crowd over there. Suddenly, the irritated Yvonne gives a thing about that crowd in front. Gets there and Sang dodges without any problem. However, he pretends to be hit by Ivan, also pretending to be thrown to back. Ivan screams desperately for Tsang to look at what's behind him. Tsang just says, "Hey, you, push me into the portal?" And he falls into the portal with the most mischievous smile in the world. And thus concludes the Marauder's map. Mischief managed. The redhead watches from afar as the protagonist falls into the rank 5 portal. Bokinia Santa says this is very bad. While everyone is ing the tragedy that just happened because a person who does not have the level to understand. Bring in the level 5 dungeon just dropped from side it. Sunga also panics upon seeing his older brother falling into the dungeon. Even the guy with no eyes on the left is panicking. Look at that. Sun, lots of sun, intense heat, and a scorching desert. Song says, but the last time he entered the portal was a jungle, and now it is a desert. Sun was standing in the trance of the portal, without taking a step, and feels some tremor beneath the ground. Something big emerged from under the ground trying to devour Sun. The protagonist manages to identify the creature, and it's a level 48 sandworm, which means it's a level much, much higher than his. Sung starts smiling because he received a very aggressive welcome, and Sung really likes the reception of a level 5 dungeon. Before hitting the ground, Sung says, "Summon!" And his warrior staff appears in his hand, and the protagonist strikes the sandworm directly, asserting that a normal monster is simply a normal monster. However, he realizes that his strike didn't have any effect on the worm, and the creature is there, facing him, without taking any damage. The protagonist looks around and is surrounded by sandworms. And all the sandworm of sand jumps on top of Sang at the same time. 1 second later, all the worms are on top of Sang. And we only hear him say, "Transform!" And a very bright light emanates from inside the worms. And Sang easily manages to slice all the worms. He thanks God for leveling up when he killed Zil. Otherwise, he certainly would be dead at this moment. And we see that the protagonist's staff has taken the form of a spear, which he obtained with the level 20 warrior privilege. Not everything is rosy, and another wave of enemies is already approaching. Rolling towards the protagonist, several desert armadillos are charging at him. I'm sucking on a candy while doing this, but I'll stop. After the candy, we'll continue. Sound 5. CA wonders what those things rolling towards them are and prepares a strike with his spear, throwing it with great force at the armadillos. Upon hitting an armadillo, it explodes into several pieces, with a very loud explosion, and Sung is very surprised. Because the last game he played that had creatures that exploded was a Minecraft mod. Sung keeps wondering if that smoke is toxic. Moments later, all the armadillos are already very close to the protagonist, and he uses his bone wall magic since he has what classes. He also gained this second ability at level 20, but in the Necromancer class. After that, a mega explosion occurs where the protagonist is. Sam was saved from the explosion thanks to the bone wall. However, he is thinking that the level of difficulty of a level 5 dungeon is very high. Sang steps out a little, dizzy because he was poisoned by the toxic smoke that came from the explosion of the armadillos. But the protagonist is always prepared, right? And he takes a healing potion from his inventory. After drinking the potion, Sang gets excited because if the difficulty is high C, surely the rewards will be enormous. Remouse. And so his poisoning status was cured, thanks to the effect of the potion he drank. The scene shifts to outside the dungeon. The illustrators keep getting confused. Sometimes they show it's dungeon 2, and other times they show it's dungeon 6. And we see Michelle, Hal, and Sunga waiting for the protagonist to come out of the dungeon, and an extra is upset because the protagonist is holding on very well in their end. He thinks Sung should just give up, or die so that the dungeon would open up for them too. Sunga, who was already irritated, said that Sung is not just holding on. He is clearing the dungeon, and the extra starts laughing, saying, "How can a damn rank C manage to clear a dungeon like this?" The extra says that Sung must be barely surviving in there. He must be hiding in some hole, making Sunga very irritated with him. Michelle tells Sunga to calm down and asks him to have faith. Now, when someone who talks too much tells you to have faith, something's not right. And Sunga, even though he's irritated by the extra's comment, goes to another corner. The chatterbox, who doesn't have faith in anything, asks Sunga if there's really a chance for Sang to clear the dungeon. And Sunga says that of course, Sang will definitely return alive and with health after clearing the dungeon. So Michelle, taking the opportunity, asks what Sung's ability is. Sunga looks at that and sees malice in what he's asking. And Sunga isn't that naive and says that he can't talk about the master's ability. Meanwhile, Michelle, hearing these words, thinks that Sunga is very stubborn and is sure that Sunga is hiding something. So Bokinia Santa, looking at the dungeon, starts thinking that if somehow Kang returns, it means he will be the 11th awakened rank A in Korea. The scene shifts to Kong in the desert, exterminating several scorpions. When he entered that dungeon, he was level 20, and now he has already risen to level 27, and he, along with his skeletons, continues to massacre all the creatures in front of him, then rising to level 28, finishing off the last scorpion. On rises to level 29, and Khan knows that in the next level he will be able to perform a new level of summoning. Yes. On continues beating down on his head, and the scorching heat. Kong is very surprised by the immense size of that desert. He has been walking for a long time and the desert never seems to end. That dungeon is truly immense. Looking to the other side, Kong sees something that catches his attention and he becomes curious. What is that? It looks like a structure in the middle of the desert. Entering that place there are skeletons, fighters, and bodyguards. He reaches the abandoned village, Reglasia. Kong continues entering the village and doesn't sense any presence at all. It seems like there's no one around. Suddenly, something breaks through the sky towards the Proda. He widens his eyes and he realizes it's an attack aimed at him. Barely dodging the attack, Khan notices that the attack is very strong as it destroyed his skull with a single blow, creating a hole in the middle of its chest. Khan curses loudly upon realizing the ambush and looking at the creatures in front of him. He wonders if they are Nagas. And the snake-like commander tells him to identify and say what the M is. Motive that made him enter the temple. Khan answers, temple? What temple? Then Kong realizes. He says, ah yes, now that I know what you are familiar with, this structure. It really is the temple of Arya. The snake-like commander asks if he knows the goddess Arya and Kong responds, of course, how could I not know? The goddess of providence of Alting? And Kong asks the snake-like commander why the followers of the goddess Arya invaded Earth, and Kong asks if Trident he also defeated the god, uses Arya. His snake-like commander gets very angry and yells at Kong not to insult the goddess Arya, and the snake-like commander says that joining Trident is only possible for a moment to take revenge on the sect. And Kong says, sect? What sect? And the snake-like commander says that he came after the traitor, who betrayed Alting and fled to Earth, the blue-eyed priestess. And apparently, Khan knows the priestess, because he becomes very thoughtful Abu, and the blue-eyed priestess. Khan, taking his spear, says that it is none of their business, his business, if they capture the priestess, kill her, or take her to Alting. He just won't allow them to invade Earth. And he says, just as the Nagas protect the goddess and the temple, he will protect Earth. And the snake commander says that he respects King's purpose, but in this case, they will fight. And so he orders the Nagas, who are invisible, to reveal themselves. And realizes that he was surrounded, and hadn't sensed their presence, and saw that all the Nagas were using Invisible Ity. Kong is very smiling when he is surrounded, because surrounding people is his specialty. However, Kong is sweating, as he didn't even sense the presence of the enemies, so their invisibility is very good. And Kong concludes that the Naga's invisibility is superior to his detection. We are not shown the level of the Naga soldiers, but Khan thinks that with the skeleton as he has, it will be very difficult to overcome the Nagas. Therefore, Ing starts distributing skill points, and thus his skeleton soldiers are adjusted. Their levels rise to level 20. Strength, speed, dexterity, and endurance of the soldiers increase rapidly. A dark aura begins to cover the skeleton soldiers, and iron shoulder pads appear in place of shoulder leather ones. The bone sword is replaced by an iron sword with rust on it, and the skeletons became much more enhanced. The summoning of skeleton soldiers is a skill that changes according to the level. After the evolution, his soldiers now have a sword and shield and light iron armor. Khan knows that even so, it will be very difficult to overcome the Nagas, and prepares for the battle. He knows that he will only be sure of how his soldiers are after fighting the Nagas, and the snake leader is all SM. Laughing, the Naga spearmen give their war cry. Meanwhile, the skulls of the Prat advance at full speed towards the Nagas. The weapons clash, and both the skeleton and the Naga see each other's strength. Khan, who also loves the fight, takes the initiative and starts facing a Naga soldier. But we can't forget that he fell into an ambush, and suddenly there was another Naga coming out of its invisibility. However, Kong separates his spear and transforms it into two swords, killing the two Nagas instantly. At the same moment, he notices that something is coming at him from above. Dodging with full speed, the Proda avoids being hit by darts that are launched at him. Kong looks in the direction of who shot the darts and sees three fools on top of a building. Then he tries to hit them, using his bone spear ability. The Nagas, who aren't fools, hide behind the wall, thus avoiding the entire attack from the Proda. The Naga smiles, knowing that the Proda is very surrounded and very fufu. Kong is surrounded by invisible Nagas and being targeted. by Nagas who are shooting darts from the top of a building. Kong sees no other way out and hides using bone walls, and only then do we see the number of Nagas that were visible around the Prota. Inside the wall, Kong begins to think of a way to get out of that place. He knows that the attacks are being chaotic and well coordinated, as he doesn't know if the Nagas are coming from the front or the back. And there are some idiots attacking him from the top of the build. Not to mention that the Nagas are at a much higher level than he is. Khan knows that by the number of Nagas on the ground. Even if it were just them, it would still be a very difficult fight, as they are very good at hand-to-hand combat. The Nagas' strategy is very good, back as those who attack so high up and, when they are attacked back, they hide. So, the protagonist has to pay attention to both those who are invisible or envy him, as well as the cowards who are attacking from above. Not a coward protagonist. In war and love, all is fair. Everything is fair. So, the protagonist got out of a very difficult situation, as neither Vivi nor the skeleton soldiers are handling the situation. When assessing the battlefield, the protagonist knows that the skeleton soldiers are much more useful than Vivi. However, the soul die. The skeleton soldiers are dying too easily, and there's no time to replace them. For every 4 skeleton soldiers killed, 1 Naga is killed, and Khan knows if it continues like this, he will soon be left without any skeleton soldiers. And he is sure, if it continues like this, there is no chance of success. So, he has already planned his strategy, and knows there is no option other than now one. However, for us who are watching, he doesn't reveal what it is. Gripping his spear firmly in hand, the protagonist prepa residential for battle. The scene shifts to the announcement on televisio, and where the reporter says that it has been 10 hours since the protagonist fell into the portal, and they can't enter, because the portal only opens it. The protagonist dies or if he clears the dungeon. The reporter identifies the victim who fell into the portal. He says it's Mr. Kong. Aranxi awakened, and says that his survival inside that portal is being considered a miracle. The scene shifts to the master of the Rumit Guild, where he says that Kong is becoming very well known. When the master of the Rumit Guild sees Michelle on television, he concludes that Michelle is about to give up on the 5-star dungeon and leave it for free to the Baron Guild, and states that when Michelle returns to the guild, he will punish him appropriately. Ichil hands a plate of instant noodles to Sunga and asks him to eat, saying that there's no thing better than waiting with a full stomach. Bokina Santa says that the shortest time they took to clear a 5-star dungeon took them 12 hours. So, he asks Sunga to eat, because they don't know when this will end, and Sunga says that his older brother the old man must be having a very hard time in there, while he is out here, unable to do anything, and looking at that black noodles with boiled egg on top. Who knows what that is? To me, it's instant noodles. That ever knows? Let me know in the comments, and if you've made it this far in the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Sunga is crying tears of joy, because he knows you're going to subscribe. Zunda wants to share his food with you. Even split the Palatine digit Billy Dedensha in half with you, so only those who like, share this video, and share action music in the background, video, and subscribe to the channel. Now, if you're already subscribed, liked this video, and shared it, Ivone's Delight will bring the dish to you. Now, if you don't like females, the one who will bring the dish to you will be Prota, like this, just in a towel. Just one thing, you can't keep putting Prota in a towel, okay? Because otherwise, I'll have to bring in the busty elves to counter. Returning to our story. Mrs. Skull is on the ground, getting that tan, and smiling a lot. Oh no, that's not it. She had fallen to the ground and just died. I don't even know how this skeleton feels, because she died twice, died when she was alive and died now after being summoned by Prota. Finally, the Nagas managed to finish off all of Prota's skeletons. And Kong, for the first time, is down on his knees, and the snake boss is really picking on Prota, asking if he invaded the temple. With just that, Snake Boss says that Prota's attack power is very weak, and Prota almost retorted with poorly done. He starts to smile, and says, oh, really? Are you sure about that? He says that 5-star dungeons are a bit more annoying than he imagined. Snake Boss, seeing Prota smile, says that Prota is just bluffing, so he's going to put an end to all of this. And Kong says that he's smiling, but it's not a bluff, it's just relief. And Snake Boss still doesn't understand what Kong is talking about. Kong says, I'm smiling, because I just leveled up. And if you remember, when he entered this place, he was level 29, and he reached level 30, thus gaining more sealed demon power. And so, he begins to use the level 30 sealed demon stone. Upon breaking the seal, the stone emits a very bright light, hindering Snake Boss's vision. All the Nagas around the protagonist are watching that light that keeps radiating. Suddenly, the protagonist's summoning appears and a gigantic hand emerges, even breaking the ground. Snake Boss really turned into a little snake, because the protagonist just summons something very large, and he becomes very frightened. Upon seeing the size and type of the summoning the protagonist just unleashed, Kong, smiling broadly, says it's been a while, and that he missed this summoning. Dusui, the name of his summoning is Dusui. I'll try to keep this name, but if it gets complicated along the way, I'll change it. Dusui is an elemental giant. It uses the material around it to transform into that element. It's usually a physical element, like stone, wood, brick, crystal, anything. And Dusui charges at Snake Boss. We see that Dusui is a golem. Here it says that Dusui is a sand golem, but actually, he is a golem not just of sand, but of any material around him. In other words, the summoning is influenced by what's around it. Now, Tsang, who was kneeling and looking up, is very cheerful, and looking from above. Tsang orders Dusui to destroy everything in his path, and kill everything that moves. I'll interpret for you. Hit whoever is hitting, hit whoever is getting hit whoever is watching, hit whoever is asking, and then ask what's going on. Cabrinia, with great difficulty, manages to dodge Dusui's hand, and orders his soldiers to form up against Dusui. And the Prota is just getting started, and orders Dusui to advance on them. And the giant Dusui advances with all his fury, and the Nagas are also very brave, and advance on the giant. The explosion from the impact was so great that it could be seen dozens of kilometers from the city. The temple was partially destroyed by Dusui's fury. He managed to eliminate all the Nagas very effectively. And now, Tsang walks towards the last remaining Naga. It's Cabrinia, who is very shaken, as Tsang managed to crush his entire army. And Tsang asks if, besides herd tactics, he has anything else to show. A very malicious question, since Cabrinia had asked him the same question earlier. Cabrinia starts to get enraged and calls Prota arrogant. With all his fury, Cabrinia prepares the final attack against Prota. Tsang remains completely smiling and commands to transform the hammer, and his warrior weapon transforms into a giant hammer. Level 30 brought the hammer to him, and this hammer also has an ability, Hurricane. Cabrinia charges at Prota with his spear, and Tsang, with a little smile on his face, activates his new ability. And he generates a massive and very powerful whirlwind. Moments later, the dust begins to settle, and Michael Jackson appears in front of us. Naga appears. Naga and Prota. Cabrinia, pure essence of hatred, starts coughing, and Tsang says that he is a very resilient lizard. He's managing to prove that he's a very tough boss, so he won't call him Cabrinia anymore, but rather Kalanguinho. Kalanguinho says he never thought there was someone so strong on Earth. His veins begin to bulge, and he starts a very strange transformation. Kalanguinho jumps on top of Prota, and says that Kalango is Prota's mother, and that he won't die without fulfilling his calling. Tsang, with his hammer, shatters Kalanguinho's head into several pieces and, smiling broadly, says that Kalanguinho talks too much for someone who's already dead. The scene shifts to the dungeon exit, and we see the trio Sunga, Okinya Santa, and Rail, also known as Hao. And Sunga is thinking that, despite everything, he's still hungry and really enjoying the food. Suddenly, Sunga gets a big scare when he hears Tsang asking if he ordered one for him too. Since that little face was so cute, I also decided to have her call Sunga the protagonist's older brother. The protagonist entered the dungeon smiling and came out smiling. Everyone is very surprised to realize that Tsang came out of the dungeon. In other words, he managed to clear the dungeon, and the reporters quickly start recording. Photos here, rushing there, flashes from the other side. Sunga asks if Tsang has any injuries, and Tsang says no, that it was a piece of cake for him. The main troublemaker looks to the side, sees the redhead, and says, "Oh, you're still here." And Tsang asks how Ivone could have pushed him into that dungeon. He said that it was very dangerous, that he could have died if something had gone wrong. The Prota is really shameless, isn't he? Ivone makes a face of frustration, but she knows she can't start a fight with Prota there, because there are too many cameras and a lot of people filming. And she is also sure that Tsang is not a weak person, because from now on, he will definitely be considered the 11th ranked person in Korea. The scene shifts to the Hammer Guild. We see the president of the guild walking away from the television. However, the reporter says there was an update in the dungeon, that after a long time, inside the dungeon, Mr. Tsang managed to clear the dungeon and get out of there. And the guild master, looking back, says, "What is this? I can't believe this. Was that guy really that strong?" A reporter approaches Tsang and asks for an interview, questioning how he managed to survive and return from that dungeon. San, very surprised, asks, an interview? Michelle suddenly steps in front and says that Kong barely made it out of the dungeon alive, that he is tired and needs to rest, and he includes himself, as if he were part of Kong, saying that we are not accepting any interviews, and the Three Stooges take Kong away from that place. The guild master Waman is very surprised because Kong managed to clear a 5-star dungeon alone, and he knows that the person he thought was weak is simply a rank A. After that, they remember the conversation Michelle had with him. It was when Michelle suggested the vice presidency to Kong, and he simply treated Michelle with great disdain and said that lately, the awakened ones Michelle had recruited were all trash. The guild master of Waman becomes very hopeful, because if Michelle manages to recruit Kong to their guild, they will certainly be the strongest guild in Korea, as they will have 3 rank A awakened ones. He starts to smile, because he knows their victory will be certain. And now, it's a shame I can't curse on YouTube, otherwise I would curse this guild leader. He says, he knew Michelle would handle the task. He's a real SOB, that guild leader, right? But I can have the little mouse say what I'm thinking. The scene shifts to a very fancy restaurant, and we see several dishes, all exquisite. 2 people are talking, and one asks the other, is what I asked you progressing? And the person responds, yes, minister, we are making good progress. And the minister said, as you know, there are many people involved in this project, and we see that the minister is talking to the Warang guild master. The minister tells Sun not to make any mistakes, not even a small one, and Sun says that he doesn't need to worry because our preparations are being perfect. And the minister, very smiling, says that he knew he could trust Sun because he is someone who does things perfectly, and says that this time he will reward Sun in a much more appropriate way with something much more incredible. And Sun thanks him, as his guild has done this type of service for the minister many, many times. In part 4 of our story, we will find out what this conversation means. After that, a message arrives on Sun's phone, and he is very surprised to discover that Kong is rank A. The minister asks if something important happened, and Sun says it's nothing, minister, it's something of his own that he will handle. And Sun starts thinking that he knew Kong was an exceptional person, but he didn't know it was to this extent. And Sun begins to recall the conversation he had with Kong. He remembers saying that the world could be annihilated if the dungeons continued like this. That's why he is gathering the awakened to prevent this from happening. Sun told Kong that this is his life's mission, to save the earth, and he hopes Kong will lend him a hand. Now, this part is new, as it didn't appear in the previous conversation, where Kong looks Sun straight in the face and says that they are all dirty inside, but great with words. And Sun says that it seems Kong still doesn't trust him. He says he hopes they can meet again. Sun keeps thinking that the protagonist is hiding some secret, and Sun has a new objective. No matter how, he needs to bring Kong into his guild and starts thinking mischievously, there's that, I'll use that, and says, minister, can I ask you a small favor? And the minister says he will do whatever the guild master asks, he just needs to say what it is. And Sun mischievously says that actually, he also wants to move another person in his plan. The scene shifts to Jaminho's house, and we hear a strange conversation, when one person says to another, sorry, but falling in love isn't a crime. And we also see Jaminho studying, fully focused, with several people nearby, talking, and others shouting. And another person says, sorry, but I don't love you as much as her. And Kong says, what? Is he such a jerk? And Jaminho starts to get more and more irritated. Jaminho looks back and says, hey, I'm studying. Can you turn down the TV and stop watching dramas? Kong, Sunga, and Bibi all look at Jaminho at the same time, and the protagonist immediately turns down the TV. Sunga apologizes, and Bibi says, meow. Jaminho is really pissed off, he even lost his concentration, because he knows there's even a cat now. Jaminho asks if the two of them aren't worried, and Kong says, about what? Jaminho says it's been 3 days since the reporters have been in front of his house. Kong says he knows that sooner or later, they will get tired, and he plans to stay inside Jaminho's house until they do. Taking advantage of the situation, Kong asks Jaminho to go outside and buy tangerines for them. Sunga, raising her hand, asks him to buy 2 bags of tangerines, and Bibi says, meow. Oh, what a cute little paw Bibi has. Jaminho, frowning, says that they forgot he's in his exam period. Kong doesn't even respond, pulls out a 50,000 note, and says that if Jaminho goes, he can keep the change. And Jaminho says, do you need anything else? 183 reis is equal to 50,000 won. Kang's phone starts ringing. Kong sees it's his mom and says, hi mom, how are you? And he asks his mom if the reporters aren't looking for her. She says no, and says something else to the protagonist that we can't understand. And Kong is very surprised by what his mom just said, and says, huh, did that come to me? Sung and Bibi are left wondering. They are very curious about what Kong is talking about with his mom. And Kong says, yes, ma'am, mom, I got it. I'll stop by later and pick it up. Sunga asks what's going on and Kong asks Sunga if Korea hasn't been unified yet. Sunga says, no, we're still separated. South Korea and North Korea. Kong is very angry because dungeons are appearing all over the world, and the Koreas are still separated. And Sunga asks, what's the problem that's happening, boss? I don't understand. If you don't explain, I won't know. Kong says, he received a draft notice for the army. Kong stands up and says this won't work, and that he's going to have to kill Kim Jong-un. Sunga is very surprised and asks if he wants to kill Kim Jong-un just to avoid going to the army. He says that's exactly it. He will reunify the Koreas. Sunga tells him to calm down, grabs the protagonist's shirt and says, do you think the countries will unite just because you killed one person? And Kong asks if there's any other way for him not to be drafted into the army. He can only see this option for not going to the army. Sunga says, there definitely is another option. They just need to look properly. The apartment door opens and Jaminho catches Sunga and the protagonist in a very strange position. Jaminho asks what they are doing and the scene shifts to many tangerines. Jaminho listens to the protagonist's explanation and asks why he's thinking about that. Jaminho informs that the awakened ones don't enlist as regular soldiers. Normally, they are selected for a special division, but if the awakened one wants, they can still do alternative services, and Kong says, alternative services? What kind? He says that the awakened one can join a certified guild and then the Ministry of Defense can summon some of these awakened ones to help defeat monsters. That would be the alternative service, and Kong is very surprised and says, as expected, there's nothing Jaminho doesn't know. Jaminho says he has a dream, which is to join a great guild. He's not even awakened. I don't know how he plans to join a great guild. And Kong looks suspiciously at Sunga and says, Sunga, you're really useless, huh? You don't know anything, do you? Sunga looks all downcast, and Bibi offers a paw to console him. The scene shifts to the Hammer Guild headquarters, and we see how very happy, telling Michel that he finally succeeded. Michel asks why he's so happy. What did he do? He says that Mr. Kong finally accepted the meeting with them and Kong wants to talk about the guild. Michel almost has a fit. He's very surprised. Then Hao says, in other words, he's going to join our guild. And Michel starts to remember the conversation he had with Proda, where Proda asks how Michel can help him. He remembers saying that his guild can help with many things, including a lot of information about the dungeons. He also remembers that he would do everything for Proda, even leaving wherever he was, to assist him immediately. Michel feels that he's finally succeeding and with a little smile on his face, he knows that all the effort he made is paying off. Michel tells Hao not to make so much noise, but congratulates him on the very good thing he just did. Michel adjusts his suit and says he's going to report this to the guild master. The scene shifts to the president's office, where Michel, knocking on the door, asks if he can come in. The guild master says he can and greets him, asking how the negotiations with Tsang are going. Michel says that actually it was Tsang who got in touch with him, and the guild master Hammer is all beaming, knowing that good things are coming. He says he's very pleased because Michel did an excellent job. And Michel says, and about the vice president position that I recommended for Tsang? The president of the Hammer Guild says, if he needs it, I can give the vice presidency of our guild to Tsang. If Tsang comes to our guild will become #1 in Korea. And it's all thanks to you, team leader Michel, and to us here, with our lucky charm. Michel heads to the elevator to leave the boss's office. Michel says goodbye, and his two-faced boss tells him to be careful and stay in the shade. After Michel leaves, the master of the Hammer Guild calls for his secretary and instructs him to prepare a dinner for the entire guild. He informs that the dinner will be today. The scene shifts to a very fancy cafe, and we see Michel looking very surprised, saying, huh? I don't understand. Then Tsang repeats, I want you to start a guild with me, I want to start a guild with you. Michel says that he thought that meeting was for him to sign a contract with the Hammer Guild, and Tsang snobbishly says, oh? Why would I go there? Putting his hand on his head, thinking he rushed things, Michel says he came to that meeting, thinking the Proto would sign a contract with his guild. Michel says he's a bit confused by the proposal because he wasn't thinking about changing guilds. Hao, also known as Hao, is very direct and asks, what are the terms of our recruitment? Tsang informs them that he will give them 100 million. They are left speechless upon hearing that word. 100 million? Let me see how much that is. And Hao asks, will our salary be 100 million? Song, smiling, says, "No, your salary will be 100 million more than what you earn." Then their knees trembled, their legs wobbled, and they went crazy. Michel even starts to sweat and says, "That money is not the problem." That's a lie. He says that he is one of the team leaders of the Hammer Guild. He also mentions that he is a normal person, and he reached a very high position there, a position that would be almost impossible for someone who is not awakened, and yes, he went through many adversities to achieve the position he holds. Therefore, he cannot change guilds just for money, and Tsung, with a big smile, says, "I guarantee that our guild will be one of the largest in the country," and adds, "Please, become founding members of the guild, both of you." The scene shifts to Hao's car. Hao tells Michel that he is going to accept that he will join Tsung's new guild. Michel is taken aback and asks, "Why?" Hao says that, to be honest, it's no big deal because he's talking about Mr. Tsung and surely he will be the highest ranked awakened. He did something that no one has done before, which is to conquer a rank 5 dungeon alone. And Hao says that for sure his guild will rise significantly and become one of the largest. And he concludes by saying that even if he stays in the Hammer Guild, he has no prospects of being promoted. Michel becomes thoughtful, as he knows this is true, and starts thinking that if Tsung continues at this pace, he will certainly create a guild with a bright future. However, the Hammer Guild has already reached its peak, and from now on they will likely face many difficulties and only regress. Michel also knows that even if he puts in a lot of effort, he won't be able to reach a high position within the divisions of the Hammer Guild. He knows he will never achieve a position equal to that of a founding member. And he keeps recalling the mistreatment that the master of the Hammer Guild has subjected him to. And Michel is certain of one thing: since he is returning without a contract signed by Tsung, he will be ridiculed and underestimated within the Hammer Guild. Since that's the case, he will definitely change guilds. Michel tells Hao that he is also going to change guilds, and Hao is very surprised. Michel also says that he will certainly face many dangers in trying to climb positions. So, changing guilds is the right choice. And Hao says to him, "Then let's go," and shows his resignation letter. Michel looks and asks, Do you always carry that around?" He says, "Yes, I always carry this around. Not just me, but all the employees of the Hammer Guild." And Michel, with a little smile on his face, also starts to take the envelope out of his pocket and says that he is no exception either. All the employees of the Hammer Guild carry this in their pocket. And Hao, upon looking at that letter, notices that it's quite crumpled and concludes that Michel must have had it with him for a long time. And so, Michel and Hao agree to resign and go out for drinks. The scene shifts to the elevator in the Hammer Guild. Upon entering the office, Michel and Hao notice that the lights are off and wonder if everyone has already left. And suddenly, everyone comes out and shouts, "Congratulations. You deserve it, Michel. Congratulations on your promotion and becoming a department head." Michel and Hao, aka Hao, are surprised by the surprise. And there it is, the embodiment of insincerity, welcoming him and offering congratulations. The guild master of Hammer promoted Michel to head of general services. And Michel is left speechless and in an awkward situation. And there's a thank you cake, a party, popcorn, candy, ice cream. Okay, I'm the one saying this, but I only saw the cake. Everyone who worked with Michel asks him not to forget them, as they were companions for a long time, and they congratulate the team leader. And now department head, Michel, once again. And Michel is there, standing, like Doug Ball, with a very fake smile on his face, and the SOB boss asks for a round of applause for Michel, the genius of negotiation. And everyone, shouting in unison, says that they respect Michel a lot, that he is very nice. And Michel is there, without the courage to speak. Michel, gathering the rest of the courage he has, asks for permission, and requests to speak with the guild master. And the guild master says that he only wants to hear the good news when they arrive at the restaurant, as he has already prepared a huge banquet, and spent a lot of money on organizing a party for him. And the Hammer Guild boss, the SOB, keeps smiling, unaware of what's coming. Will Michel speak up or not? This reminds me of the subscribers. There are people who watch my video, view it, and don't have the courage to press the subscribe button. Did you watch it? Did you like it? Subscribe. They will all be in this style. Please like and share. That helps me a lot. Also, don't forget to send it to your grandma on WhatsApp. Go ahead and bother your grandma with this thumbnail. Returning to our Manhwa, the master of the Hammer Guild had reserved a restaurant for them to have dinner. So, since he's going to break the bad news to his boss, might as well do it on a full stomach and, of course, at the boss's expense. Michel is saying he's going to go crazy if things keep going this way, and Heel asks Michel what they are going to do. Heel thinks it doesn't seem like the right time to tell the guild master. Michel, very thoughtful, says he also isn't sure, but he has to do something. Heel who is very clever, takes his resignation letter out of his pocket and hands it to Michel, since Michel is his boss, and resigns. Michel is taken aback, asking, "Why are you giving me this? We have to do this together." He said, "Of course not. You're the one who has to do it. You're the one being promoted. I'm leaving." Heel, with a very cheeky smile, says, "I'm leaving, okay? Take care. Accept my resignation, head of the General Services Division." Michel gets really angry and says, "You bastard." Heel says, he can't even eat because he's so uncomfortable there, that the food won't go down. So, he's already heading to Kang's guild and wishes good luck to the team leader, Michel. Michel tries to go after Heel, but he's held back by the boss. The guild master, SOB, asks Michel why he's not joining the others and wants to hear, along with everyone, about his act of heroism and how he managed to close the contract with Kong. The director asks Michel, please, to talk about what he did and how he accomplished it. Michel starts to choke and no words come out of his mouth. And the director tells him not to be so modest and to just speak up. And Michel just says, very quietly, "I failed." The boss doesn't understand what he said and says, "Huh? What? What did you say?" Michel says, "I failed. I didn't get the contract. Mr. Kong doesn't want to sign the contract with us. So, I have nothing to say, and I apologize." His boss starts trembling with anger. And the two women in the back, one looks at the other and says, "Hey, let's eat quickly before the party ends. Let's fill our bellies." The guild master Hammer gets really pissed off. He says, "You bastard, you're not serious, are you?" The guild leader curses him, saying, "Raw tomato." Only those who understand well understood. Michel, respectfully, says he's very sorry. And the guild leader, shouting, says that feeling sorry won't solve anything. And he asks, in a very threatening tone, if Michel wants to be fired. Michel thinks, that would be so nice, huh? I would be so relieved by that, and I would still take home the 40% penalty from the FGTS. The guild master asks Michel if he knows how much of the Hammer Guild's money he spent trying to bring Kong to his guild. And the guild master's SOB says that just apologizing won't solve anything, and Michel remembers the things he did to try to win over the Prota. The first thing, he let the Prota enter a level 4 dungeon of the Hammer Guild for free, and he also cleared all the appointments for that day. Michel also remembers that he used the Hammer Guild's money to change the Prota's ranking from F to C. He worked hard and used many resources from the Hammer Guild. Therefore, Michel says he will take responsibility and starts to take an envelope out of his pocket. The guild master's asshole, responsibility? You have no responsibility at all. Michel takes out his and Heel's resignation letters. And, resigning, says he will take full responsibility. The guild master's SOB says, "Are you crazy? Leaving the company is not taking responsibility. You're not a politician. You're a coward, and are running away after making a mistake." Michel swallows hard and becomes thoughtful, knowing he no longer needs any excuses. He can already leave this company. Between us, this guy is going to die young from a heart attack because he didn't even curse the boss. I'm going to look for a meme to sum up what I'm thinking. Screw you, man. After thinking about this meme, Michel gives a very mischievous smile. Michel says he's finished what he was going to do and tells the guild master to take care. Well, Michel knows that when you leave through a door, you shouldn't close it. But the guild president isn't going to die of a heart attack, and he starts cursing Michel, who leaves with a smirk on his face after having caused several losses for his boss. Internally, Michel bids farewell to the Hammer Guild and sets off for a new beginning. Michel, leaving the Hammer Guild, starts walking calmly, feeling free and easy. Suddenly, he's surprised by someone calling him, "Team leader. Come here, I want to talk to you." And it's Heel. Heel was there waiting for him. Michel told Heel that he thought he had already left. And Heel, with a big smile, says, "Where am I going? Without my drinking buddy? Let's drink until we drop. Can I sing for you all again or not?" "No." The scene shifts to a coffee shop. Kong and Sunga are welcoming Michel and Heel. "So, welcome to the Ardal Guild." Michel exclaims, "Ardal? What do you mean, Ardal?" And Kong explains, saying, "Ardal is the name of our guild." Kong, extending his hand to Michel, says that he will be under his care. And Michel says that he will also be under Prota's care. Michel says he will do everything to ensure the guild starts off well, and tells Kong he can feel comfortable with his presence. Then, Kong says, "Then I'll feel comfortable. I'll call you Michel." And Michel didn't want to get that comfortable. He asked to be called Team Leader Michel. Then, Prota, with a big smile, says he'll leave the guild's foundation to Michel. After that, Prota invites the three of them to have a beer later. And Michel keeps asking if the beer is for the meeting they will have. And Kong says, "Meeting? What meeting? Do we need more meetings than this?" You're going to have to do everything anyway, and I'll just be watching. And Kong says he's already done his part. He's already chosen the guild's name, and the rest, all the rest, is up to Michelle and Heel. And Michelle finds it very strange for a guild president to be so direct and so different. Prota looks at Sangha and says, "Shall we go to the barbecue? Shall we eat something special today?" And Sangha says he knows a place with excellent Korean meat. Oh, it's not going to be barbecue, it's going to be raw fish. Michelle doesn't even let Kong leave and says there's something he needs to decide. Kong is confused and says, "What is it that I have to decide?" He says that Kong has to register the conquest of the level 5 dungeon he cleared, so it belongs to the guild. And also, if he wants to rent it out to other players, he has to register. Registration is mandatory, and Kong says he won't rent it to anyone. He wants to clear that mine himself over and over again, and Michelle keeps trying to convince him, saying that when he's sleeping, or too tired, he could rent it out. And the protagonist keeps thinking about Michelle's arguments, and Michelle says there's one more thing he needs to resolve, because to start a guild, they need 5 people on the team. Kong knows they only have 4 people and starts thinking about who the 5th person to join their guild could be. First, Kong thinks about including Jamieing, but Sangha warns him, saying that Jamieing is underage and minors can't join a guild. So, Kong becomes pensive and soon has an idea. Looking at his phone, he realizes he knows very few people. Kong even considers putting his mother as the 5th person, but quickly changes his mind because he knows if his mom goes there, she'll be the one in charge of everything. And Kong becomes very cheerful because there's still that guy. Kong calls him and tells him to come immediately. A few minutes after the call, the door of the cafe opens, and Kong is very happy to see his little buddy from the phone, the punching bag. Kong asks if he brought the work card and the documents he requested. And our blonde friend, shaking like a leaf, says he did. The protagonist gets close and gives him a light pat on the back. The blonde guy immediately flinches, thinking he was going to get hit again. However, he is surprised when Kong says to him, "Welcome to the Ardal Guild." Kong, with that mischievous look, says that he is our 5th member. "You are our 5th founding member of the guild, you damn cell phone salesman." And the damn salesman is frozen, not knowing what's going on. Later, I'll come up with a name for this blonde guy, okay? In the next chapter. If you liked it and want part 4, just ask for part 4 in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Those who don't